their treatment being denied has been that their disease is essentially not serious enough for it to be worth the cost of treating them.
Talamo says hepatitis C can progress rapidly if it's left untreated. The sheriff says the office takes its health care duties seriously. Police in Sutton say the death of a Topsfield woman at a state reservation appears to have been an accident. They say the 49-year-old woman was hiking with 3 of her 4 children when she fell off a cliff at Purgatory Chasm yesterday. Hiker Alexis Claudio says it can be a challenging place to walk.
You do definitely need to be careful. There are some rocks, high heights, if you're not careful.
The woman's name has not been released. The state reservation was closed yesterday. It has since reopened to the public. Police in Salem say a suspect is under arrest in connection with the deaths of 2 men in that city. Authorities say 30-year-old Jay Blodgett faces 2 counts of murder after the men's bodies were found in a wooded area near a Walmart this morning. He faces arraignment today in Salem District Court. In sports, the Red Sox host the Mariners this afternoon. A beautiful spring day, sunny afternoon temperatures in the 60s, clouds overnight, lows in the 50s. Mostly sunny tomorrow, highs in the low 70s. Right now, 58 in Boston. This is GBH.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people, and the Skoll Foundation, dedicated to powering social innovators to transform the world. Learn more at skoll.org.
He's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. A little programming note here. We're going to be at the Boston Public Library tomorrow, joined by Andrew Cabral, Shirley Leung, plus Press Play with Adam Riley and Sue O'Connell, our media maven, and some great rapping live music Friday with rapper, author, and educator Paul Willis. Hello, Jim.
Hey there, Marjorie. How are you?
Excellent, thank you.
So we're going to start today with this question. Are Americans so obsessed with ourselves, our personal economic issues, and Trump's complete assault on our own democracy that we've lost the ability to care about the larger global fights for peace, for stability, for democratic freedoms? Here's some of the facts. In Gaza, the violence continues unabated. There's an ongoing 8-week blockade of food, medicine, and aid for Palestinians in Gaza. 59 hostages have yet to be released. Something like half of them are presumed dead, while 50,000 Palestinians are believed to be dead, a third of them people under 18 years old. On the Ukrainian front, yesterday, President Zelensky rejected a so-called peace deal offered by the Trump administration that would cede control of Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula, seized by Russia violently, I think it was 11 years ago, and fully rule out the possibility of Ukraine ever joining NATO. Trump accused them of prolonging what he called a killing field. And then Trump today, as you just heard on the national news, after this barrage of missiles and drones on Kyiv killing people, I guess on Truth Social or something, says, Vladimir, stop. I'm sure that's a serious kind of thing. The lines are open at 877-301-8970 to call or text. We know it's hard to stay tuned in to all of this years after both conflicts started, but are you worried like we are about what happens when we as Americans stop caring about people suffering in other parts of the world? And in part they are suffering, at least in our estimation, because of America's lack of caring. It's our inaction. Our number is 877-301-8970. It's almost like out of sight, out of mind. I mean, in part because you don't see images like we used to see regularly, particularly from Ukraine. The sense I get, I hope I'm wrong, we'll hear what our listeners have to say, is we really don't give a damn about the suffering of any of these people, as unjust and as disproportionately absurd as it is.
Well, Tom Nichols had a great piece in The Atlantic where he talked about what Trump is basically allowing to happen here is a complete
Ukraine.
Surrender.
Yeah.
That's a total surrender, that offering Putin a dream of a deal. Washington will lift sanctions against Russia, so they get rewarded for this.
For doing nothing.
Yeah. Well, they get rewarded for invading Ukraine.
Well, no, I'm saying they give up nothing.
They give up
part of
nothing,
the deal, and they get everything.
Yeah, they'll put this ceasefire in place, but there's no. It's the security guarantees are not exactly guarantees, if you ask me. For the United States, the United States will agree to recognize Crimea as part of Russia, leaving the Kremlin with full ownership of previously conquered territory. So basically, it's a total giveaway to Vladimir Putin.
I think Crimea, I may be wrong on I think it's roughly 20% of Ukraine's territory. Again, violently seized from a sovereign nation, from Russia. I think it was in 2014. And the situation in Gaza is totally out of control. And I was criticizing you and me yesterday for not talking about the suffering is just unbelievable. And there was this story, I just briefly touch on this, where a couple of weeks ago, I think the number was 15 medics were killed by the Israeli defense forces, to use that term, saying that they were I believe the term they used was they were approaching suspiciously, I think it was, and there were no signs. Well, it turns out a phone camera was recovered from one of those killed, which showed
by the New York
video.
Times, the much hated legacy media,
right? Which showed that in fact their emergency signals, the lights had been on, the sirens were on, and we were not getting the truth. And there are 15 more dead people there. It's just, and by the way, the number of children who are being killed in both Ukraine and in Gaza is incredible. And in my opinion, one of the reasons why our country allows it to happen, well, there are two reasons. One, because Donald Trump doesn't give a damn about anybody except himself. And number two, because we don't put any pressure anymore on our leaders, because we're as self-obsessed. It's all about tariffs. I understand that matters, inflation, and all that sort of thing. 877-301-8970. I hope we're going to be proven wrong. I hope you're all doing something and concerned about it and writing your members of Congress, but I don't think so.
There are always these kernels of legitimate upset in the stuff Trump talks about. I think he had a legitimate point that Europe is dependent on the United States so heavily for their defense. They should throw more money into their own defense. It shouldn't always be us.
A lot of them have thrown a lot more money.
They have. Well, that's a credit to Trump, you could say, because he's the one that's made a big deal about that. But that doesn't mean you should totally abandon the whole operation. And that's kind of like he's going. Everybody, well, not everybody, but I think a lot of people would say the federal government could use some tightening. It may be a little bit bloated, but that doesn't mean knock it all down. It's the same thing going on here. It's all about like the transactional thing of how much money the Europeans are putting into this. They say that they will help the Ukrainian people in Poland and France and Germany, because they realize, they fear that if he gets away with this, especially in Poland, they'll be next. But they can't really do it all without the United States.
Here is Rubio, who is the Secretary of State, speaking to reporters on a tarmac last week about what he calls U.S. support for Ukraine and what happens if they aren't able to do a peace deal in the coming days and weeks. Here's Rubio.
We're prepared to do whatever we can to facilitate that and make sure that it happens, that it ends in a durable and just way. If it's not possible, if we're so far apart that this is not going to happen, then I think the president's probably at a point where he's going to say, well, we're done. We need to determine very quickly now, and I'm talking about in a matter of days, whether or not this is doable over the next few weeks. If it is, we're in. If it's not, then we have other priorities to focus on as well.
And the reason it is not, to use Secretary Rubio's language, is because of what Marjorie described a minute ago. The so-called peace deal proposed by Donald Trump is a total capitulation to his friend Vladimir Putin, of whom he is enamored and of whom, well, I mean, we said this the other day, there are a lot of people who have far greater expertise than we will ever have, including the former acting head of the FBI, says it's plausible to believe the President of the United States is a Russian asset. But I mean, he said it.
Well,
he said it.
Tulsi Gabbard, who's the intelligence person, she's thought by many to be a Russian asset.
Or a Syrian asset. At least
both.
under Assad.
Both.
877-301-8970. Do you care about this? Do you care about what's going on in other parts of the world? Is our characterization of the lack of caring on the part of the American people misplaced. Maybe we're just wrong and we're just tracking Trump's lack of concern.
And Tom Nichols also argues, and I think it's a great point, that the Russians have lost a lot. They estimated as many as 1 million soldiers have been lost. But if they get this deal, the Trump basically Ukraine surrender deal, then the Russians will have time to finish the job, regroup, and then they will just take over all of Ukraine. I mean, that's what he seems to think, and he knows a lot more about this stuff.
Is Zelensky one of the great heroes of our lifetimes, by the way, in terms of courage, and strength, and dedication to democracy and his people? Yeah, and they're picking on him, obviously, and he dismisses J.G. Vance as not knowing what he's talking about. 877-301-8970. Let's start with Robert in Brockton. Hi, Robert. Welcome. Oh, this is not going to be day two. Oh, hello. Yeah. Hi, Robert. Hi.
Yes, that's right. Day two of me flushing my thoughts.
Sure.
Good. We're probably going to flush them in a second, Robert, so go right ahead.
That's okay. I'll wait for the sound of the toilet.
Go ahead.
I do not agree with Zelensky, and I am focusing on the people of Ukraine, the families, from the oldest to the youngest. How many people are dead in Ukraine from this war? How many people, approximately? I have no idea.
Okay, what's your point, Robert, please?
My point is save the people, stop the war. Ukraine cannot win. They cannot regain what they've lost. They cannot...
Robert, let me try to be respectful. Your point, you haven't thought this through, with all due respect. Stop the bombing, stop the war. At what cost? Surrendering 20% of your country's territory that was violently taken by another country, and as Marjorie was just reading from Tom Nichols, put Russia in a place where they have the ability to regroup and take all of Ukraine and murder whoever the hell they want in Ukraine. So your basic notion is one with which we agree. We want peace. We want the bombing to stop, but not if it means abject capitulation. But Robert, thanks for your thoughts.
It's not clear at all that the Ukrainian people want to stop the war either. I mean, I think a lot of them are behind Zelensky, want him to keep fighting.
Well, you remember Trump made up yet another number when after that thing in the Oval Office about some single-digit percentage of people.
Yeah, that wasn't true.
And it was actually a majority of people who were supporting this incredibly courageous leader.
Remember how at the beginning of this how we had, and it seemed to be a futile effort right from the start. Remember, we all expected Russia to take over whatever they wanted to take over.
Well, remember those videos from overhead that was going to happen right in days.
And we all had the yellow and blue pins, and people had yellow and blue flags, and you saw them all over the place. I saw some of them at the hands-off rally a couple of weeks ago, the yellow and blue flags, but they kind of totally...
Well, because we have the attention span of gnats in this country. I mean, we get engaged in something, and then we move on to the next shiny object. And sadly, Ukraine and Gaza are not shining enough for us right now.
One more thing. There was always talk, and I don't know whether it was the right thing to do, that a lot of pressure under Biden to support Ukrainians with air power, and we never did it. And so I don't know that it's clear that we couldn't have done that.
It was too slow. There's no question.
And might not have, not we won the war, but the Ukrainians might have pushed back the Russians. I mean, 1 million people is a lot to lose.
Linda in, I believe, Exeter, New Hampshire. Welcome, Linda. Thanks for calling.
Hi, thanks.
Hi.
Yeah.
Sure.
Jim, you make me crazy. I love you to death. But
well, thank you. I appreciate
it. I'm a retiree.
Yeah.
Most people do not have the luxury that I have to write the letters, make the phone calls. They're trying to figure out what it means that they're trans and they're in jeopardy. They're trying to keep a family going. They're trying to pay the rent and not lose their job. I mean, we have to understand, this is why Bill McKibben started Third Act, because we, at this stage of my life, are the ones, if we have the health and the bandwidth and a little bit of resources, we can fight this fight.
Yeah. By the way, Bill McKibben is
going to join us.
Bill McKibben's going to join us about 12:50 today because he has an appearance this weekend in Boston that we're going to talk to him about. Respectfully, Linda, I don't disagree with you at all. I'm not saying that an average person who is overwhelmed with family and work and should all of a sudden start sitting down at night and writing letters to their members of Congress. What I am saying is you have to care. You have to say something. You have to talk about it. Keep the subject matter alive. That doesn't take a lot of exertion and energy. And in my estimation, you may disagree, the vast majority of people in this country don't give people, the Palestinians in Gaza and the Ukrainians, a second thought because it's not on the evening news like it was nonstop months ago. But Linda, we appreciate your efforts. And Third Act is a fabulous organization founded by Bill McKibben. People should check it out. Linda, thanks for the call. 877-301-8970.
You know, Robert just asked how many troops have died in Ukraine. There are different estimates. One has, by the U.S., 57,500 killed, 100,000 to 120,000 wounded. Zelensky said there are 370,000 injuries, but that could be repeated injuries and minor wounds.
But that was an inappropriate question. The question, what Robert was saying is, since tens of thousands of Ukrainians have died, they should just cut a deal. Well, the deal pretty much guarantees that tens of thousands more will ultimately die at the hands of Russia again.
Is in that 20% of the country, Russia's going to run it. And I think the Ukrainians wanted their freedom. They didn't want to be back in having Vladimir Putin as their leader.
Well, it's also an incentive. Take more land. After this, wait a few months, take more, and then the United States under Donald Trump is going to say, you can own that piece too. I mean, really. Let's go to Kathy in Andover. Hi.
Hi, Jim and Marjorie. Thank you for what you do.
Well,
bless your hearts.
Whatever.
Anyway.
Thanks.
Well,
no, it's very sweet of you. I mean, we don't do anything. We just talk to you. But go ahead. Thank you,
That's
Kathy.
Okay.
Very
but
nice.
Listen, one thing I do is, you're welcome. I wear my Ukrainian shirt that I got
it's great.
A few years ago. I wear it once a week, and if it's in the winter, I put it over my sweatshirt. In the summer, I would wear it with my shorts, and it's a simple message. And the other thing I do is there's a lovely shop in Newburyport, and the woman that owns it has adopted Ukrainian children, and she has a jar in her shop. And when I go in, I put a 20 in, or I handed it to her.
By the way,
everybody can do something.
You know, Kathy, I wish I had thought of what you were saying
the children
as a
issue.
small act. Well, not just, even the shirt issue.
Yeah.
You make a statement. You don't have to do anything. You put on a shirt, you wear it. It elevates people's consciousness. And that's what I should have said to the woman from Exeter a minute ago. Small things like that, and I don't mean small in a pejorative way, matter a lot. What's the name of the store that's owned by the woman with the Ukrainian kids?
Oh, she has. How am I going to describe
Can I make it, Kathy, if you think of the name in the next bit, email us at bprwgbh.org and we'll say it on the air. Kathy, thanks for what you're doing.
Also brought up the issue of children, though, and obviously we know that a lot of these Ukrainian children were kidnapped by the Russians and being brought up there. There's
with no chance of ever being reunited with their parents.
Thousands of kids, which is, pretty horrible, being taken from your parents and sent to another family in another country. We're talking about the continued fighting in Gaza, the continued fighting in Ukraine. Have we lost interest? What should we be doing about it? Our attention span wanes when it comes to global crises. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Today on The Culture Show, Grammy-winning singer-songwriter Loudon Wainwright. His career has spanned more than 5 decades, and he's earned a reputation as folk rock's great confessor, telling deeply personal stories about marriage, lust, and growing old. The legend joins us ahead of his shows in Northampton and Lowell. That and more today at 2 on The Culture Show, 89.7 GBH.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Bryant University, committed to exceptional outcomes and empowering students to leverage their ambition and work together to become purpose-driven leaders. Learn how you can transform your future at bryant.edu. And Chevalier Theatre, presenting Little Feat on their Strike Up the Band tour, spanning genres from California rock to funk. Tuesday, May 6th at the Chevalier Theater. Tickets and information available at chevaliertheater.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marge Regan and Jim Bradley. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're talking about, at least our thesis, Marjorie's and mine, that most of us have forgotten about Palestinians in Gaza and the Ukrainians, people fighting for their lives, for their freedom, for dignity, and some of you are being really aggravated by the premise behind this. We'll read a text in a second. Our number is 877-301-8970.
Dan Randolph says people aren't demonstrating about Gaza anymore out of fear of being disappeared. And I think Dan raises a great point. I mean, we're seeing what's happening to people that did join pro-Palestinian protests, not pro-Hamas, but pro-Palestinian protests. These are some of the people that are not born in the United States who have been picked up by ICE and sent out of the country, including the woman from Tufts University. When you read her op-ed in the Tufts Daily newspaper, it's not pro-Hamas. It's worrying about the deaths in Gaza, and she's now still in the Louisiana detention center.
So here's an anonymous texter, one of the people aggravated that with our premise. Today's premise is insulting, inflaming, and privilege. How many things are we supposed to care about right now? I care about the safety of my own family, our retirement savings, our business, whose clients are largely universities. Of course, we care what happens in Ukraine and what happens in Gaza and Israel, but on a crashing plane, you have to put the oxygen mask on yourself first. Obviously, you do have to put that oxygen mask on yourself first, but as that woman talked about a couple of minutes ago, we can do small things. I'll give you another example. I used to wear that Ukrainian flag pin almost every single day. Why did I stop doing that? I don't know. Remember how I used to end every show at Greater Boston? Please don't forget Ukraine. Why don't we say, please don't forget the Palestinians and the Ukrainians every day or every other day or once a week? There's small things you can do. I'm not suggesting that all of a sudden you drop concern for your own family and security. It's just I think most of us could walk and chew gum if we chose to.
But I don't think it's necessarily true that people have forgotten about them. I do think this has been, as we said, sort of a full frontal assault on almost everything in the United States the first 100 days. So there are a lot of things to be worried about. I mean, who could have thought that we'd been in this shape so quickly? Oh, another texter says, what about Sudan? The nutritional supplies that are being held up because of the transfer of their work to the State Department. You know, the front page of the New York Times was this brutal photograph last Sunday of a little 2-year-old girl in this beautiful little party dress with bones. I mean, she's dying of malnutrition. And the thinking was that China was going to step into the breach. Well, apparently they're not stepping into the breach fast enough, because the children whose food used to come from us, they're not getting any food at the present moment, at least large numbers of them. And by the way, there are about 20,000, I just want to double check that, Ukrainian children kidnapped during the war.
One other thing bears mention, we can't ever say it too much, we say it all the time, one of the great frauds on issues of helping people in other places who are suffering is Secretary Rubio,
oh my God,
where there was no greater Republican supporter of USAID until he was assigned by his boss, Donald Trump, to rip down USAID, and now we don't need it anymore. Let's go to...
Listen to this. A texter says, we just replaced our Ukrainian house flag. It was beat up over the winter. Now they've got a new one.
Good for them.
Yeah.
Again, that's another thing. That doesn't take any effort. Get the flag, put it up, and then go about your lives. Ellen in Hanover, hi.
Hi. I just wanted to say two things. One, I think people dismiss that this is all connected. Everything that Trump is doing, we knew about before. And people have this idea and constantly say, and politicians give them a pass on it, everybody's too busy. But we're not too busy to have billion-dollar distraction industries. And we have plenty of time for video games and porn and, making TikTok videos. And we were literally told, your rights are going to be taken. Democracy is at risk. He's been siding with Putin. He's been siding with Netanyahu long before this election. He has been absolutely blatantly and openly corrupt. He is selling off the United States piece by piece, right out in the open. And with NATO, it drives me crazy when people say Europe is doing more, blah, blah, blah. The United States benefits so much more than any European country for global peace. Our ships move, our industry moves back and forth. And another thing I would say is we create more global strife than any European country, and yet they go to war with us and on our behalf.
That's a great point, too.
Ellen, you just shamed us.
Those are all great points, Ellen.
That was truly
That's right. Yeah,
perfect.
The Canadians were saying, "Hey, we were with you in Iraq. We were with you in Afghanistan. Gee, and you're so mad at us now." You know what I get a kick out of too? Remember in the Obama's Iran nuclear deal to slow down the creation of a nuclear weapon over there. Trump got rid of that almost like a day after he got into it. And now he's in a mess because what's happened, of course, is the Iranians have gotten a lot further.
And he wants the same deal, doesn't he?
He's trying to go back and he's trying to negotiate the same deal that we had with Barack Obama, but he's going to claim it's a different deal and a much better deal.
It's a beautiful deal this time.
But we would have been so much in better shape, and the Israelis would have been so much less worried about a nuclear attack from Iran had we just stayed with the Obama deal.
Can I ask you a question which has nothing to do with this?
What?
I use the word beautiful because everything is beautiful and the biggest
Beautiful
and whatever.
deal.
What happened to Bigley? Do you remember?
Oh, I don't know. That used to be.
Bigley was one of his. Is that an adjective or an adverb? Adverb,
he
right?
said that all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
He never says it anymore.
No, it's like nothing you've ever seen. Everything is like
it's a big,
nothing you've ever
beautiful.
seen. Big, beautiful. Big, beautiful.
You know,
deal.
your best imitation is this. I'm going to do an imitation of you imitating him. Clean coal.
Clean. What is up with that? Clean coal.
Let's go.
I don't know.
I'm sorry.
Let's go to Chris in Jamaica Plain. Hi.
Hi, thanks for this conversation. It's been a long time coming.
Mm-hmm.
I think that one of the things people can do is if you have some protection to stand up for those groups. So it's very difficult for Palestinians and Muslim people to put themselves out there. And that's where Jewish people like me,
good for you.
And that's where I use a wheelchair, and I have a keffiyeh on it. I've had a Black Lives Matter and a Pride on there. And when people see that, they come to me and thank me. And all I say is, that's the least we can do, right? And I think the issue is, as Ellen said, I believe it was Ellen, this is their plan. They are trying to destroy democracy. All of this, right? Naomi Klein wrote I encourage people to read The Guardian piece that Naomi Klein wrote called End Times Fascism. They are really moving to destroy everything and leave it just for the wealthiest. And we have to fight. See, this is not individual things, but a whole attack.
Chris,
so
that was great.
Appreciate
That was great, Chris. That was another really solid call. By the way, an anonymous texter makes a very good point on our side in response to people say they have, there's only so much they can do. The anonymous text says, everyone seems to have plenty of time to call BPR and bitch, which...
Well,
or
it
text,
is a good
fairness.
point, as Ellen made. If you cut down on your TikToking and your porn watching, you'd have a little bit more time. Remember when the study came out? It was years ago. It was before the internet, really, that more money was spent on pornography in the United States than all sports betting combined. Football,
wasn't
basketball,
that written by
Rich.
Frank Rich? We had Frank Rich on the show. This is before he created or executive produced Veep. He was at the New York Times at the time. He wrote the New York Times magazine. All entertainment combined. Yeah. That was ages ago. Before. Yeah. And there's much more.
So if you're doing 2 hours a day, maybe you cut down to an hour and a half.
Let's go to Joan in Wilmington, I believe. Hi, Joan.
Hi, Jim and Marjorie.
Hello.
First-time caller.
Thank you for making a call.
Well, sure. I'm going to try to make these quick because I know you're busy. But
okay.
My sister was a refugee attorney in Dublin. She immigrated back to Dublin, and she used to she worked with Somalians, with Ukrainians, and they would meet her in the street and they would give her baked goods, and it was just wonderful. They were so appreciative. And I feel like as Americans, dare I say, we're almost spoiled. I mean, these people have lived lives where they have seen terrible, terrible things. And I also remember, she lived with a Ukrainian. And right around 9/11, I was visiting, I was saying how horrible that was and how terrible. And I remember him saying to me very just rationally, that happens all the time. Mm. And I don't mean to make light of it. No. I just feel like we need to get involved. We have to, be aware and realize that America great again does not mean America only again. And it's just very distressing. And the second thing I feel is that it's hard. So when I talk about the Palestinians, I think it's so easy to be called anti-Semitic.
Of course.
That it causes us to watch what we say. And that's not right either. It's all deliberate. Thank you for taking my call.
Joan, that was an extraordinary first call.
But
Call us again, please.
I think Joan makes such a great point. Mm-hmm. We are spoiled. I mean, you see in the United States of America, and we talk about why other people don't. Why didn't all these people in Gaza throw off Hamas? Why didn't they do that? Mm-hmm. Well, they didn't do that because they'd probably be killed for their efforts. And we here in the United States, people, billionaires, can't stand up to this guy, Donald Trump. They're not going to be put in jail. They're not going to be dragged through the streets on motorcycles. They had a great video, not great, it was a very disturbing video about Palestinians that protested Hamas, how that's what they would do. It was gruesome to mention, but they would drag them through the streets in the back of motorcycles as a warning to other people. That's what they do there. What happens to Putin when people protested him? They get poisoned. They get thrown off bridges. They get shot crossing the street. Journalists get shot in their homes. So we are spoiled, but we're not only spoiled, I think we're kind of chicken. We have the Pacific and the Atlantic on either side of us. We've been immune because of our geographic location from some of these wars. I mean, think of the courage it takes to be a Palestinian to stand up to Hamas now.
I agree.
And, we were going to talk about this, but we'll talk about it later, about the Shari Redstone, the woman that owns Paramount.
Selling out CBS News in 60 Minutes.
Now, she's going to make $8 billion if she makes this deal, but she already is loaded. So these people with millions and billions of dollars, they can't give up.
Never enough.
It's never enough. So I think it's greed here, and it's being spoiled here, and it's a lack of courage.
By the way, if you haven't read the story about the lead producer for 60 Minutes quitting because of a disappearance of editorial independence, and it all because of Redstone's desire to cut this deal and make another buck, we're going to discuss it at some length tomorrow with Adam Riley and Sue O'Connell during Press Play. So that's it. Thanks for your calls. They were terrific.
Okay, we are moving on. We're going to talk to our food man, Corby Kummer. Here's something I think a lot of us can agree with.
Can I add one thing? 176, I think it was Zoe added this, 176 journalists, people in the media, have been killed in Gaza this year. 176. That's from the Committee to Protect Journalists. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and like I said, we wonder why they can't throw off Hamas. Why can't we throw off Donald Trump? Because nearly half the country thinks it's okay what he's doing. Anyway, I think a lot of us think it's great to get rid of some of these very bad petroleum-based food dyes and ultra-processed food. So at least RFK Jr. is doing that. We're going to talk about that and more with our food policy analyst, Corby Kummer. He's next on Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
The Trump administration ran TV commercials in Mexico discouraging immigration. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum denounced the ads.
Hacer propaganda política ideológica.
They're making political and ideological propaganda in our country, she said. That's next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Standish Village in Dorchester's Lower Mills, providing assisted living residents with programs designed to help seniors stay sharp, social, and independent. Learn more at standishvillage.com/programs. And the Hanover Theater, presenting The Moth Main Stage on April 25th, featuring true stories told live and without notes to honor the diversity and commonality of the human experience. Tickets at thehanovertheater.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browdy live at the library tomorrow. I thought we were at the library now. We're not. Streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're joined now by food policy analyst, multiple James Beard winner, Corby Kummer. Corby is the executive director of the Food and Society Policy Program at the Aspen Institute, senior editor at The Atlantic, and a senior lecturer at the Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition, Science, and Policy. Hello, Corby Kummer.
Hello, Jim. Hello, Marjorie.
Hello,
Hey.
Corby, so we're going to start out with a clip from Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s announcement yesterday where he plans to get rid of all artificial dyes from food and drinks by the end of next year.
Food dye is just a no-brainer. Nobody wants to eat petroleum. Everybody knows there's enough science out there that we know it's terrible for you. A healthy person has 1,000 dreams. The sick person only has one. And right now, there's 60% of the people in this country who have only one dream. If they can make it through a day without pain, with energy, we are going to change that for our country.
I don't know if food dyes will solve all your health problems, but he's right about since other countries don't allow a lot of these things, we should be getting rid of these food dyes, shouldn't we?
Yeah, I'm happy to see us get rid of food dyes that Europe has been banning in favor of this ridiculous loophole that's been going on with the Food and Drug Administration since the 1960s. Especially from the mid-1980s, in self-declaring what's generally recognized as safe, or GRAS. And the industry saying, we think it's fine, we're putting it into our products, come after us if you don't like it, we've told you it's fine. So Kennedy is saying, well, there's ambiguous science. The FDA has been saying for years these dyes haven't been proven to be bad. What lots of U.S. advocates and RFK Jr. have been saying is, yeah, but if Europe has decided they're bad, why are we saying they're fine? So, okay, it's great to be synchronizing in the rest of the world. It's good for industry. They hate reformulating. They're not happy about this because it's not going to make Mountain Dew or Doritos or Fruit Loops look as pretty and bright as they were before, but what they do like is consistency. It's important to say that RFK Jr. said he'd come to an agreement with the 8 largest food companies, but those food companies haven't said independently, we're fine with this.
Yeah, usually they protest big time. Their lobbyists get the government to change their mind on these things. Isn't that what historically happens?
It's not even a ban yet. It's just an agreement that they should be voluntarily doing in the next few years. So we have to see what they're doing. But RFK is getting ahead and announcing and saying, I've talked to them all and they're going to be fine with it. We'll see if they are fine with it. But what industry wants is consistency. What they don't want is state-by-state bans.
Which is why they may honor the agreement, so to speak, right?
And by the way,
it'd be good. It'd be great if they honor these agreements.
We should point out in this piece of The Atlantic, I mean, obviously other people have said this too, that synthetic food dyes can be linked to things like inattentiveness, hyperactivity, restlessness in certain children, neurobehavioral effects, not in all children, but in lots of children. And boy, we do have an epidemic of ADHD, don't we? Maybe it is to do with this.
Whoops, we lost you there.
No, I'm right here. Absolutely right. Completely agree.
So can we continue? Let's call this part of our segment Even a Blind Squirrel, talking about RFK Jr., because he's also right on something else, but it seems to me that this is going to be a lot, this is not intended as the pun it is, this is a much tougher nut to crack, so to speak. Very clever, Jim. Thank you.
Very
clever. Ultra-processed foods. We've talked a lot about the subject matter with you. We haven't talked much about the fact that he appears to be hell-bent on getting rid of them. And it seems to me there are two problems. One, it's not 100% clear all the time what fits into that undesirable category. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. And two, he's going to encounter much more of a fight from lots of places, including even some places like schools, right, which are dependent upon cheap, ultra-processed foods to feed their kids. Is that a fair statement?
Ultra-processed food are a big, thorny problem that we'll be talking about again and again, and that's fine. There's no agreed-upon definition. It's sort of standing in for things that are really high in sodium and sugar and stuff we should not be having. And lots of artificial ingredients we don't want in our own bodies or our children's bodies. What Dan Giusti, fantastic chef who worked in world-famous restaurants and then decided, I'm going to start Brigade, B-R-I-G-A-I-D, helping to put in from-scratch meals in school systems all over the country, starting in Southern Connecticut and New York State. He had an op-ed just now in Civil Eats and saying, to keep to the 1/2 reimbursement rate that school breakfasts get from lunch. And I believe, Dan Giusti and many others, we need to be feeding children breakfast. Often all they will eat are cereals. Cereals are lumped in ultra-processed food. It's going to be harder and harder for schools that aren't equipped for non-ultra processed, for scratch cooking. We can't do this without the so-called ultra processed food. So what are we going to do when we want to give children school breakfast? Until we can get the equipment in to these schools in order to give them from scratch cooking, which we all believe in. We can't be throwing out the baby with the bathwater with ultra processed food. This is definitely a problem.
One of the points that's raised in this piece is a lot of critics of this say, defenders of it, is it's very hard to get kids to eat, school kids to eat healthy food. But haven't we discussed with you a million times that healthy, well-prepared food, once kids are exposed to it more than a few times, I don't know what the critical number is, 8 or 9 times or something, they become as enamored of those things as they were enamored of crap, right? Isn't that true?
It's not so much enamored, it's dependent on.
Okay.
It's what can they do in order to be able to feed children.
Okay, we're talking to Corby Kummer.
Natural food is not always better, apparently. Even we think it is, and it's not.
No, natural food can have, beef tallow. It can be plenty of fats that aren't particularly good for us. It depends on what the natural food is. What we want is unprocessed food like nuts, like seeds. There are plenty of things, but natural is not necessarily better for you. And so there's a funny column, a good column by Tamara Haspel in the Washington Post about saying natural doesn't always mean better, but because we don't like ultra-processed, we're using these things to stand in for lots of foods that are high in artificial ingredients, high in synthesized chemicals, high in sodium and sugar, stuff we don't want. Natural is lower in them, but natural doesn't necessarily mean better or healthy. Raw milk is natural and it's likely to make you sick. It's really problematic. And so natural doesn't always mean better.
When you said what we really want are nuts and seeds, what seeds do we want? I mean, what I can't think of
seeds.
The last seed I ate that made me happy. What is a typical seed experience, Corby?
Pumpkin seeds.
Exactly.
Never had a pumpkin seed my whole life.
Oh, yes, you have.
No, I have
pumpkin
not.
seeds are wonderful.
They're everywhere.
Sunflower seeds are wonderful.
Sunflower seeds, that's another good one.
That's not that good. They're little tiny things. You got to eat like 1,000 of them.
You put them
it's
in
like
your
krill
salad.
for a whale.
You put them in your salad.
You do?
Listen,
Yes.
if you had trail mix, if you had granola, you've had seeds in them.
I have.
That's right.
I have had
pumpkin
those
seeds
things.
are trail mix. That's a great example.
Fine. Now, speaking of civil
Krill for a whale.
I said that.
Who's
I just
the
said
whale?
krill for a whale. No, and that's what like krill. Krill comes in. Krill. You know what size krill is? Like microscopic.
Tiny, but they have a big mouth. They can eat a lot of it.
Well, they eat a lot of krill.
That's
okay,
right.
so that was my point. Not
Okay.
very well taken, though. So there's another wonderful story in Civil Eats that I think a number of people might dismiss until they read on. It's a story about free grocery stores. And I fear that if you don't read through, people are going to say, well, there are a lot of places that provide free food for people in need. So what's the big deal? This is a big deal. Tell us about it and how widespread are these kinds of places?
So it's a new kind of food pantry. So food pantries are different from food banks. They get food from food banks, but what they are is like little mini grocery stores. And this was a terrific place that partnered with the Baltimore Public Libraries. Public libraries have reinvented themselves. They're wonderful job resources. In this case,
some have radio shows in them. It's incredible what they do.
That's right.
So,
go ahead.
There are cafes in them. Here was a Sunny Bright Cafe, kind of like at the BPL. And once a month, it becomes a food pantry that goes in and it sets up very appealing places that take out the stigma of getting free food. No one has to show any kind of qualification for getting this free food. There's a handful of them in the U.S., but the idea is we're giving you food and dry goods also, detergents and things that people get from supermarkets, and we're going to make it a pleasant, stigma-free experience in a bright, sunny room that we'll do once a month. Food pantries, in my food is medicine work at Aspen Food and Society, I'm now getting very involved with food pantries and recognizing how essential they are for communities, because they'll open in small places in very convenient locations in a community. And they don't have the big logistical problems of food banks, which are fabulous things in themselves, but food pantries are just there's thousands of them in the US. They're underfunded the way they always are, but this is a case of making food and groceries available free in an appealing location in public libraries.
So is this happening anywhere in our neck of the woods here? Because I'm not familiar with it.
I looked for this long article in Civil Eats, and there were California, it mostly focused on Baltimore, but I didn't see any, Nashville, Chicago, San Francisco, but I didn't see anything. So I hope that Bostonians will read this article in Civil Eats about these new food pantries and say, we can do this in Boston too.
I love this idea. I think it's terrific. We're talking to Corby Kummer.
We've heard a lot about the soybean farmers out in the Midwest and how they're freaked out about the tariffs with China because they sell so many of their soybeans there. This was a local story out of the Globe by John Gove, talking about how these federal cuts in funding that go to schools and nonprofits and regional food distributors are going to take a toll on the farmers here, because those are the places the farmers sell their stuff to.
It's all over the country. It's infuriating. The USDA cut off billions of dollars that Vilsack, under the former secretary, had made available to get locally grown food into schools. And so the defense of the current administration is they can still get produce, they'll just buy it cheaper. What does buying cheaper mean? It's nothing like local. Already the USDA had a local definition of within 400 miles. In Massachusetts, it's usually within 2 towns. It's very small farms. They can't afford to undersell the big national distributors. And so what it means is schools who want to demonstrate what produce is like in a local community, grown on local farms, can't show their students, yes, this is what local means. What's worse is farmers who were getting, $200,000 to $300,000 a year, that can be a huge part of their annual income and can help keep them alive from these USDA funds. They've been cut off. It was a terrific story by Gov in the Boston Globe. But I see this happening throughout the country because of these big USDA programs that were discontinued. The administration said this was during COVID. This was to help others. We don't need them anymore. You can buy national distributed cheap produce.
Okay, so Marjorie, when we were preparing for the show today, said, I want to discuss Megan Markle right away with Corby. And I said, we have to act responsibly for 15 minutes, and then we can discuss Megan Markle. So we have
a little sound here.
Here's the sound, right?
Yeah, here's the sound from Inside Edition, covering this critical story about Megan Markle's raspberry, don't call it jam, which is apparently another log on the fiery feud between her and the firm.
We're in the midst of a royal jam war. Meghan's father-in-law, King Charles, has been quietly running his own jam business for the past 15 years. First up, King Charles's fruit preserves. Yeah, this is very good. Then, Meghan's raspberry spread. It's very tart, and no, I'm not a fan.
So it won some kind of blind taste test, this raspberry jam scam, or I shouldn't say scam, a thing that she's, you tasted any of, what is she, the Duchess of something or other?
Sussex or something.
Whatever.
Duchess of Sussex.
Tasted any of her stuff there, Corby Kummer?
No, I have tasted almost all the products of so-called Duchy Originals, which were King Charles's, then Prince Charles. I visited the farm in Cornwall. I interviewed the farmer and the people who built the business model for it. It was a way of making money from his inherited land in Cornwall and also using sustainable and regenerative farming methods to help make a profit. They make really good oat biscuits. Duchy Originals that have been available in markets, really not just Whole Foods, but lots of U.S. markets. For years, they were very interested in building a business. I don't recall tasting any jams. This is a new California-based business that's part of Meghan Markle's branding and new TV specials about lifestyle and how gracious she is. The Washington Post did a very funny tasting. It wasn't the clip you just showed. Very well organized. And Trader Joe's came in number 2, right under Megan Markle's. And the tasters, there were 3 pastry chefs in Washington. It was blind. They weren't necessarily predisposed to like it. Who knows if they're anti-royalist or they don't like Megan, but they said, it's really good. It's perfectly fine. And it's got very fancy boxing. It's not a good bargain per ounce, and it's hard to get, but they liked it. So I think it's great.
It's great. Now, I went to her website. Her company, her food thing is called As Ever, EVER. And I went to the so-called store online because I was going to buy Marjorie something because, as you know, she's a big fan of the monarchy and ex-monarchy in this particular case. Yeah. Do you know what the status of every single food item on her website was, Corby Kummer?
Sold out, I bet.
Sold out, yeah. Exactly. Every day. From honey with wildflower honey with honeycombs, $28. Flour sprinkles, not Flour, Flower. What are flour sprinkles, and what do you do with them? Hello?
You say they look pretty, and you get bragging rights for saying this is Meghan Markle's Prince Harry's wife.
$15.
People are into her and Harry. They
what
got
do you mean
that
people
TV.
are into her? What are you?
She got the TV show, and that kind of got trashed by some, but apparently it's got decent ratings. I haven't checked this week.
I don't think so. Is that
it's
true?
Not doing that well.
I'm sure Corby is watching. You watching the thing, whatever it is that they're doing
Every minute wrapped.
I know you were.
Okay.
Can we spend the next few minutes on somebody who I'm afraid much of our audience hasn't heard of?
Too young.
I am a huge and have been a huge fan for virtually my whole adult life. This particular gentleman, who Corby's going to describe to us, has just celebrated his 97th birthday. We're going to play a song from him in a minute. Tell us who Tom Lehrer is there, Corby Kummer.
He's about the most brilliant and funny man who ever lived.
I agree with that.
He lives in Cambridge, and he went to my high school and graduated at 15 and went to Harvard. And like he was done by the age of 18 or 19, his first love was mathematics, and he taught at MIT, at Wellesley, and then UC Santa Cruz for many years, spending about half the year in Cambridge. But in the 60s, he made an international career, still a cult figure for probably the funniest songs written by an American humorist, not just satirist, but humorist. Incredibly perceptive, sharp, and funny. And many people, including young people, including Daniel Radcliffe, know his songs by heart and go on talk shows and sing his song, The Elements. They're wildly clever.
Well, we have one here. Here's a clip of Tom Lehrer's song from 1959, and it's called We Will All Go Together When We Go. Here he is. And is great. How is he, by the way, Corby Kummer?
Fantastically sharp, with the most incredible memory and a sense of humor and dry wit and brilliance. And he titles emails Still Not Dead.
That's a riot.
That's pretty good. And is your connection the high school thing, or is it more contemporary? What's your connection?
No, it's part that we had a very strong mutual friend who was his neighbor and very close friend, and invited him over for holidays. And it's just one of the most fortunate things in my life that I got to meet him.
Well, speaking of fortunate things, I can't disclose the name before you go. Marjorie and I spent the afternoon with a very prominent Bostonian the other day, whose name we can't mention.
We did?
Who said to us in the middle of our afternoon together, having a drink or two and some other things, that her favorite guest on this particular show, Boston Public Radio, do you know who her favorite guest was? Corby Kummer. Yes. One of the most respected people in our community. We just can't say who it is because we didn't get her permission. But trust me, Marjorie has no idea who I'm talking about. And she was there. This is like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, that's
okay.
right.
Well, I'll share it with both of you at some point in the future. Hey, Corby, wish Tom Lehrer our best, and please tell him that we are huge admirers of his brilliant work. We're pretty fond of yours, too. Take care of yourself, Corby. See you soon.
From everyone. Thank you so much.
Corby.
See you. Take care.
We've been speaking with food policy analyst, multiple James Beard winner Corby Kummer, executive director of the Food and Society Policy Program at the Aspen Institute, a senior editor at The Atlantic, and a senior lecturer at the Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition Science and Policy. Coming up after noon news, we're going to speak with my Holyoke president, Danielle Holley. She is one of the first college presidents in the country to push back against Donald Trump's effort to basically control higher education in the United States. Danielle Holley is next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
You're listening to Boston Public Radio with Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. Just ahead, more smart conversation about what's going on in our community. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And M&M Skylights. Servicing Massachusetts and New Hampshire, their team is part of the Velux Skylight Specialist Network and is committed to helping improve the air quality in your home or business. Consultations and more information at mmskylights.com. When a young, delusioned doctor leaves the UK, she moves to South India and finds work at an understaffed and overworked hospital. Watch Good Karma Hospital tonight at 9 on GBH 44.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, ahead on Hour 2 of Boston Public Radio. We'll speak with another New England college president standing up to Trump, Mount Holyoke's Danielle Holley. She's been on the forefront of the burgeoning resistance movement in higher ed, calling for her fellow university leaders to hold the line on academic freedom and diversity.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Then Boston Globe Love Letters columnist Meredith Goldstein joins us to discuss the plight of lovers in a dangerous time, including one man concerned that his daughter's reliance on her father's cash will ruin any prospects of long-term love. All that plus a quick check-in with Bill McKibben ahead of a climate event this weekend. That's next on the second hour of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Ukraine's air defenses over Kyiv last night against the latest wave of Russian strikes. President Trump, who has sought to mediate an end to Russia's more than 3-year-old war with Ukraine, has expressed frustration with the leaders of both countries, Presidents Putin of Russia and Zelensky of Ukraine. NPR's Charles Means has more on the peace plan the White House has touted.
The White House has yet to publicly offer specifics on this peace plan, but it's clear it heavily favors Russia on paper. J.D. Vance said this deal would lock in the current front lines or something close to it. But the latest dust-up with Ukraine involves Zelensky's refusal to acknowledge the Crimean Peninsula, which Russia took from Ukraine in 2014, as now formally part of Russia. This is apparently a component of this U.S. peace deal and a non-starter for Ukraine. As to Russia's reaction, the Kremlin only said it welcomed American negotiation efforts.
NPR's Charles Means reporting. The Vatican says more than 50,000 people visited the body of the late Pope Francis on the first day of public viewing in St. Peter's Basilica. NPR's Jason DeRose reports from Rome that the viewing continues until Friday evening.
After 3 days of public viewing, Francis' coffin will be sealed Friday at 8 p.m. local time. The following morning, the funeral rite takes place in St. Peter's Square. Later that day, Pope Francis' body will be interred in the Basilica of St. Mary Major across town. Saturday marks the beginning of something called the Novem Dialis, an ancient tradition of 9 days of mourning and masses for the repose of the late Pope's soul. After that period, the conclave begins, at which cardinals will elect the next leader of the world's 1.4 billion Roman Catholics. Jason DeRose, NPR News, Rome.
In the United States, home sales slowed sharply last month. NPR's Scott Horsley reports on the latest numbers from the National Association of Realtors.
Spring is ordinarily a busy time for buying and selling houses, but not with mortgage rates near 7%. The combination of high borrowing costs and high prices is keeping homes out of reach for many would-be buyers. The Realtors Association says sales of existing homes were down almost 6% last month. The average selling price continues to climb, however. Last month it was just under $404,000. A flurry of new orders for airplanes caused a spike in durable goods orders last month. The Commerce Department says orders for long-lasting manufactured goods jumped a whopping 9.2% in March. Stripping out airplanes and other transportation equipment, durable goods orders were flat. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
U.S. stocks trading higher this hour. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 255 points, or more than 0.5%, at 39,862. The S&P has climbed 1.3%. The Nasdaq is up 1.8%. It's NPR News.
And from the GBH Radio Newsroom in Boston, I'm Judy
Illinois
Ewell.
court has sent.
As thousands of mourners gather at St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, Catholics across Massachusetts are attending memorial masses in honor of Pope Francis ahead of his funeral this weekend. Archbishop Richard Henning of Boston presided over a mass at St. Teresa's Parish in Roxbury last night. He says it's important to have community.
The whole idea was to give the people of God an opportunity to come together, be together, to raise their voices in prayer, to remember this Holy Father who's been so close to us.
2 more masses are planned for this evening in Lowell and for tomorrow in Stoughton. Archbishop Henning is heading to Rome for the Pope's funeral on Saturday. Several Massachusetts nonprofits working to reduce gun violence and crime have been defunded by the Department of Justice. The DOJ says the grants were canceled because the nonprofits were not aligned with the Trump administration's goals. ROCA, a Chelsea-based youth violence intervention group, was stripped of $6 million. Executive Vice President Dwight Robeson says they're at a loss to understand why.
We were obviously very disappointed to receive 3 termination letters from the Department of Justice for grants that support our efforts to prevent violence and enhance public safety in Boston, Springfield, Hartford, and Baltimore.
The Boston-based Community Resources for Justice was stripped of $37 million in grants. In sports, the Red Sox host the Mariners this afternoon. A beautiful spring afternoon, sunny, highs in the low 60s. Clouds tonight, lows in the 50s. Mostly sunny tomorrow, highs in the 70s, and showers and a chance of thunderstorms on Saturday. Right now it's 57 in Boston.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Capital One with the Capital One Saver Card. What's in your wallet? Terms apply. Details at CapitalOne.com. And the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation at macfound.org.
Welcome back to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. Jim Braude and Marjorie Egan. We're going to be back at the Boston Public Library tomorrow. We're going to be joined by Andrew Cabral, Shirley Leung, Press Play with Adam Riley and Sue O'Connell, which is going to focus on the seeming collapse of CBS News. Yeah. And we've got Live Music Friday. Rapper, author, and educator Paul Willis. No tickets or RSVP needed. Hello again, Jim.
I just want to say one more thing. We originally had Governor Healy scheduled for an hour to 1 at the library. Change. She'll be with us on May 9th from noon to 1 at the library. On Tuesday, we spoke with Wesleyan President Michael Roth about the unique challenge of being a college president right now and why resisting Trump's attempts to dictate speech and diversity in higher ed matters. That interview came the same day that Harvard finally filed a lawsuit against the Trump administration over the $2.2 billion funding freeze. Alan Garber, Harvard's president, told NBC News yesterday that Harvard will, quote, not compromise on its rights with the Trump administration.
They want to directly review who we hire on our faculty. That has implications for what kinds of views can be expressed on campus. They also want to be able to tell us who we need to fire. And they also want to intervene in our admissions processes. That is what we are objecting to. We are defending what I believe is one of the most important linchpins of the American economy and way of life, our universities.
Today, we're continuing the conversation about the role of academic leaders in the age of Trump 2.0 with our next guest, Danielle Holley. Holley is president of Mount Holyoke College in Western Mass, where she's led since 2023. Early on, she urged higher ed leaders to stand up to Trump back in December, actually, over pressure around diversity initiatives. She's also the co-chair of the group Lawyers for Civil Rights, with whom we speak quite regularly. She joins us via Zoom. President Holley, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much, President Holley, for joining us. So I don't know if you had a chance to hear the president of Harvard on TV last night, NBC News, but I'm wondering if you think that Harvard appearing to stand up to Donald Trump sort of changed the equation so you wouldn't be one of the lonely few out there of the college presidents in America standing up to him almost by yourself. Do you think it mattered what Harvard did?
Oh, I think it matters tremendously. I think we've seen a shift, a positive shift in the response of higher ed leaders. We saw this week, after Harvard stood up last week and filed the lawsuit this week, we see over 250 college presidents from as diverse schools as Notre Dame to Yale to, of course, I signed from Mount Holyoke, all saying that we oppose government overreach into the work that we do as colleges and universities. And we had not seen university leaders stand up in that way in this letter by AACU this week. So I think Harvard standing up has made a tremendous difference.
Why do you think you're a Harvard Law School grad, so you have a connection in addition to being an academic leader now? What took so long, do you think, for Harvard to join the ranks of people like you? When I said early on, literally, it was a handful of leaders, you, Roth, then eventually the president of Brown, Princeton, a few others. What took Harvard so long in your estimation?
You know, I think there's a tremendous amount of fear. All of these universities, especially the universities like Harvard and Brown, Columbia, have a lot on the line. We're talking billions of dollars and research that affects everything from women's health to questions of nuclear energy and climate change. So there is a tremendous amount on the line. So I understand the fear of many higher ed leaders, but it also was necessary for us to draw a clear boundary with the government and say, there are areas, lots of areas of what we do at the university that should not be overseen. We engage in compliance around Title VI, the American with Disabilities Act, lots of laws, but that doesn't give the government the ability to reach into the most private areas of university governance.
Do you worry that, even though you obviously don't have the kind of level of federal funding, even as a percentage of your budget, that places like Harvard do you worry that you've made your place a larger target? I mean, you have been unwilling to move on diversity, equity, and inclusion. You're a gender-diverse school, been very welcoming to trans people, all anathema to Trump and his ranks. Do you worry that there are going to be consequences for your operation?
We've already seen the consequences at Mount Holyoke. Mount Holyoke, as you said, was founded in 1837 on the premise that women have a right to higher education. This government is attacking women in higher education. For example, we were a sub-awardee for a National Institute of Health award, and the letter to us from the government said, studying gender is non-scientific and has no benefits to society. So by definition, places like Mount Holyoke that value supporting women and people who are marginalized on the basis of their gender, we were always going to be under attack by the government. And that was really my point, was that there's no reason to hide, because our values are so incongruous, are so different from the government, that if we hide, we would be abandoning our mission, our values, our vision for the college.
You know, President Holley, I wonder what you make, even though we've had more colleges come on board to defy President Trump. Now he's issued these new directives about what he wants to see at colleges. I mean, Jim mentioned when you came in, you're co-chair of the Lawyers for Civil Rights. He's taking direct aim at accreditation of colleges if they consider diversity at all. I mean, how threatening is that? What does it mean, first of all? I don't even know what accreditation means. I guess that means your ability to operate, but I'm not sure.
So I'll give the example of law schools are accredited by the American Bar Association. And that basically means if you want to operate a law school in the United States and your graduates are going to practice law, it needs to be accredited by the American Bar Association. The attack on accreditors is very serious and people should take it seriously. They specifically singled out the American Bar Association and the accreditor for medical associations, trying to intimidate those accreditors to abandon their standards on diversity, equity, and inclusion. The government makes a false claim that diversity, equity, and inclusion requires hiring of certain people based on race, and that is obviously false. So there are many false claims in the executive order we saw last night about accreditation, and it is another attack on universities and on expertise, and whether universities and colleges really have expertise that's good for the public. And this is another attack on that value of universities and colleges.
Can we stay on yesterday, the executive orders he signed? Besides the accreditation issue, he is directing, and as we said yesterday, quoting Margaret Sullivan, these executive orders are not law.
Right.
It's very important for listeners to know that racial disparities in terms of school discipline, the ability to prove that the threshold has been totally changed and it's much more difficult. Other discrimination, same way. When we spoke to Michael Porter from Wesleyan last week, he thought that, and that was the day that the statement from you and your 180, Michael Roth, my apologies, the 180 or whatever it was, university leaders signed on to that statement. He thought that it was possible that Trump would back off. In fact, it appears in the last few days he's doubled down. What do you worry about, in addition, what's already happened, could come from the Trump administration directed at higher ed in this country?
Yeah, I think we saw what could possibly happen next, which is the attack on accreditors, and I think the attack on tax-exempt status. Yeah. So we saw the president post on Truth Social that he wants to take away Harvard's tax-exempt status. And so making tax-exempt status political, I think, is the next step in trying to challenge universities and colleges. If you remember, J.D. Vance gave a speech that's called Destroy the Universities. I don't believe that the government will back off, because making sure that the electorate is less educated, is more pliable to the aims that they have, is a real goal of this administration, and attacking universities is a critical part of their ideal and their kind of vision of America, and it's really scary.
When you say they want to make Americans less educated, why?
I think they don't want to be challenged. I think they worry this discussion of intellectual diversity, which again we see in the executive order from yesterday around accreditation, claiming that universities and colleges need more intellectual diversity. What I would challenge them to do is visit more universities and colleges, because there are professors of all different political backgrounds on our campuses. So I think it's really an attempt to make sure that people who are being educated only have their points of view, and that is not the goal of universities, to make sure that our students agree with the government. That is not our goal.
I want to be clear, when I'm smiling at you while you're saying that, I wasn't smiling at the content. While you're saying, President Holley, they should visit these universities, half of them went to these universities, and they're trashing the very same places that they were lucky enough to graduate from.
Yeah, there's an irony of pulling up the ladder behind you. So you receive an education at Penn, you receive an education at Yale Law School. Many people in the administration went to Harvard and other Ivy League and Ivy League Plus campuses, and now they're claiming that those campuses are actually a harm to the students who attend there. And again, these false claims about what we do inside universities and colleges, are really chilling, because they are trying to convince students and parents that a bachelor's degree, a degree that helps you achieve 62% more in terms of earnings than if you have a high school degree, they're trying to convince people that these degrees are not good. And ultimately, that is a danger to our democracy, to try to convince people that they shouldn't learn, that they should not disseminate knowledge, that we shouldn't create more knowledge. Attacks on knowledge are attacks on democracy, and we need to recognize them as that.
But all these attacks are cloaked in the notion that they are standing up against anti-Semitism, and we've discussed ad nauseum on the show that it has nothing to do with that. But do you think the American people understand that it's about what you're suggesting it's about, and not this faux effort? I mean, these are the same people who are hanging out with white supremacists, so it's a little hard to argue that anti-Semitism is a great concern to them. But does the average person in the street in Western Mass or anywhere else get it?
No, I don't think so, because, I mean, we have so many worries that are happening in our country. Most people who aren't deeply embedded in higher education are not worried about this on a daily basis. I thought the president of Harvard made a very good point, and they did in their litigation, which is that the government has yet to prove that they violated the Civil Rights Act through engaging in anti-Semitism on their campuses. Anti-Semitism is incredibly serious, and we need to take it very seriously on our campuses. But that doesn't give the government the ability to come inside our private universities and begin to be an administrator at the universities because they claim to be combating anti-Semitism. They have not made any findings that would suggest that they have that power, that they have that authority, and I think they do not.
We're talking to Danielle Holley. She's the president of Mount Holyoke.
You know, we've seen people taken into custody. Most recently, the Tufts, well, she wasn't the most recent, actually, but she was a Tufts student who wrote an op-ed not in favor of Hamas, but in favor of peace in Gaza and the Palestinian people. She's still in ICE custody down in Louisiana. And there seems to be a sense now that you cannot protest for what's going on in Gaza, for Palestinian lives, without being targeted as anti-Semitic, at least by some. What's the rules up at Mount Holyoke? If there's continuing killing and maiming in Gaza, what can students do if they want to protest that?
You know, we strongly believe in free speech and free inquiry. We encouraged students last year to, on both sides of this issue, to make sure that they were raising their voices, but doing it in a way that allowed us to remain as a community at Mount Holyoke. And that means respect for all people. We don't have a tolerance for really abusing people on the basis of their race, ethnicity, or religion. And so we made that clear, that what our community standards are. And we've really had a very peaceful and, I would say, respectful expression of the protest movement last year on our campus, partly because of that deep understanding of who we are as the Mount Holyoke community, which is a community of respect, mutual respect towards each other. So again, I think that these caricatures of who we are on our campuses are not helpful. And even though we saw lots of mistakes last year, there's nothing that indicates, and the government has yet to show, that we are incapable as campuses of handling these matters internally through our internal governance processes. And that is, as the government, that's their burden to show that they would need to be on our campuses to supervise us because we broke the law. There is no indication. They have yet to make a finding against any university, including Columbia, that they broke the law in any way as administering their policies last year, and we need to hold the government to that standard.
Speaking of Columbia, how much did they hurt the cause by that fairly rapid capitulation, Danielle Holley?
I think it's the worst kind of thing that you can do. There is no reason for a university who's had no findings that they've done something illegal to engage in that kind of discussion with the government. Again, I understand that there's a lot on the line, a lot of fear, but I think it goes directly against the mission of universities and therefore is destructive to the university. If you engage in talks with the government that lead to giving up academic freedom, freedom of inquiry, et cetera, then you have nothing to base your university on. So I think it is a really, really serious, dereliction of the core mission of what we do as universities, to say that you'll give over hiring, you'll give over control of individual academic departments to the government. That goes directly against the freedom of speech, freedom of inquiry, and academic freedom that's at the core of university life.
Marjorie was talking to you about student protests a couple of minutes ago. We looked up your student body is somewhere a little bit north of 20% international students. What do you say to them to provide any level of comfort or well, what do you say to them when they know that they are targets? Because virtually every day we see yet another person snatched for having done virtually nothing except speak.
Honestly, it's been very heartbreaking. I held a community forum with staff, faculty, and students 2 weeks ago, and to look out over the faces of all these beautiful young people who have chosen to come to the United States to study and further their education, and now they're being put under threat by the American government. It is really devastating to look at teenagers and tell them that the government here could consider some of them to be dangerous was a very difficult moment. So what we've been able to say is that we will support them in every way that we can. We are looking for trends, and I'll say just a warning that this is not just about political speech. Many of the students in Massachusetts who've had their student visas changed, we're talking about very minor criminal offenses, including things like just being accused of driving under the influence. So not even criminal convictions, just being charged with very minor crimes can lead to their student visas being revoked. And again, it is done as an intimidation and a destabilization of what we do at universities. And many of our universities will not move forward without international students. We have brought international students here, and they're a critical part of our community. And so this is a way of, again, destabilizing universities, creating such a spirit of fear and uncertainty on our campuses.
You know, one of the things that's most remarkable that we talk about almost every day is it's been barely 100, well, not even 100 days yet of Donald Trump's return. Do you think about what higher education will look like after 4 years of this relentless assault?
I have thought about it, and I think as higher education leaders, it is our duty at this moment to take a very clear and positive stand about what we do and why we do it, because if not, there won't be much left in 4 years. I think we'll have to be creative. We'll need to work in coalition together with other higher education leaders, because it'll be very hard for any of us individually, even someplace like Harvard, to stand up on its own against the federal government for the next 4 years will be very difficult. So it will require us to work together to really explain what are the boundaries and limits that democracy, that our Constitution, that our laws require when the government interacts with universities and colleges.
Yeah, we're talking to Danielle Holley. She's president of my Holyoke College. You know, we've never spoken to you before, but Jim and I have argued over the years, even though his daughter
I knew you were going to do this.
Even though his daughter went to Smith College, and
she almost went to Mount Holyoke, by the way. That was her final.
And I started at Smith College, got a great education. I was having trouble getting a date, so I left, but I had a great education there. But the value, I think women's education is life-changing, having experienced it myself. I think your daughter had a great experience there. Except he argues all the time we shouldn't do this. So give us the pitch, President Holley. Why is women's education important to the United States of America?
We have 29 women's colleges left. I can't say enough about how wonderful our sister schools like Smith and Bryn Mawr and Wellesley are. You know, women's education is critical. We do work at Mount Holyoke that helps to talk about the way that women are impacted, especially by climate change. We're having a big climate change summit that's feminism and climate change today over the next couple of days on our campus. You know, we study issues around the way that the history of higher education has impacted women's ability to earn and their ability to have an equal place in many of our settings, including medicine and law and finance, even now until 2025. I teach a seminar on the Supreme Court, and there's something special about being in a classroom with women and people who are marginalized on the basis of their gender as we talk about reproductive rights. It helps women to find their voices and to lead in society. When you think of all the amazing leaders and creative people that have come from women's colleges, the United States would not be the same without women's education. And I hope that everyone listening will support a women's college and encourage the women in your family and people who are marginalized on the basis of gender to really attend our colleges, because they are incredibly special places.
I consider myself chastened, I want you to know, President Holley. You know, before you go, since you mentioned the Supreme Court, and obviously you're a pretty significant legal scholar in addition to being a university president, we also talk ad nauseum here about the clearly intentional and a relentless decision by the Trump administration, at least in our estimation, to not comply with court orders, including directives from the Supreme Court of the United States, particularly around the facilitation, that's their word, not mine, of the release of Brego Garcia from a prison in El Salvador. How does this end up when how does this end up?
I think we may be headed for a true confrontation between the Supreme Court and the executive. I do not know how it will play out. We have not seen this kind of confrontation between the courts and the executive in a very long time. I think that Chief Justice Roberts, as the head of the judicial branch, will need to provide some leadership to say, court orders must be respected. Obviously, courts don't have their own military or way to enforce their orders. They depend on the rest of the government to act in good faith. And so it will require, I think, of the Chief Justice probably to come forward at some point if the executive continues to ignore court orders and say, we just can't tolerate this. And that will be a very difficult step to be taken. And I don't know if we will see that happen, but there must be some confrontation eventually on this point, because if not, the rule of law and separation of powers, which is what our Constitution is based on, cannot survive an executive who fails to comply with court orders.
Danielle Holley, we really enjoyed talking to you. I hope you'll return soon. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, and wishing you and the women of Mount Holyoke College continued success through this difficult time. Thanks you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure.
Coming up after a quick break, Globe Love Letters columnist Meredith Goldstein going to tell us what to do when you're dating a dud who wines and dines at Costco. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
In 2008, at the peak of the Great Recession, people started having fewer kids.
Which means 18 years later, right now, there are fewer students going to college.
This is known as the demographic cliff.
I'm Kurt Carapezza from GBH News.
And I'm John Marcus from the Hechinger Report. On our podcast, College Uncovered, we stand on the edge of the demographic cliff and take a look at how universities are dealing with this catastrophic problem.
Listen to College Uncovered wherever you get podcasts.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Mass General Brigham Health Plan, ranked #1 in member satisfaction among commercial health plans in Massachusetts by J.D. Power for the second consecutive year. Details at mgbhp.org/everyday. And the Boston Symphony Orchestra, announcing the 2025 season of Tanglewood, showcasing the beauty of incredible surroundings and world-class music. Tanglewood, where music goes for the summer. Tanglewood.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browdy live at the library tomorrow, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. I want to mention again, we were supposed to have the governor tomorrow, and in case you missed it, she had a conflict. She will join us on May 9th from noon to 1. Joined now, though, on Zoom by Boston Globe advice columnist Meredith Goldstein. She's also host of the Love Letters podcast, which Marjorie never stops talking about. In any case, Meredith, it's great to see you. Hi.
Hey, Meredith. So let's start, though. We'll get to the podcast later. About Mrs. Paul Revere. It never occurred to me to even think for 2 seconds about Mrs. Paul Revere, the 250th anniversary of the battles up in Lexington and Concord. I guess I should have, but I didn't.
Well, I think about this a lot because we have so many productions now and movies about, the untold stories of women. And I think one of the beautiful things when Hamilton first started its run, that people were like, oh, there are all these women connected to these men. And of course, and guess what? They were making all of these things possible. And in some cases, really the story of interest. And I think with Paul Revere and seeing the Globe coverage of this anniversary, I just kept thinking, my first thought was, I didn't even know if he was married.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, he takes this ride. Does he have kids? Like, is anybody? I never thought about it. I just know
What kind of person says, I never thought about whether or not Paul Revere was married? Nobody thought about whether Paul Revere was married.
Had 16 kids.
But this is the thing. If you write relationship stories, you think, well, who's making it possible? Or do you live alone? Like, if you have a kid, who's watching the kid? Right? What's happening? So the first thing I did, of course, was go to Google and do some Googling of this. And then I just saw all of these wonderful people who had thought about it, and also people who hadn't thought about it. And as it turns out, she was home with a lot of kids. And when I say a lot of kids, well, at that point, I think she would have had 7 kids with her. He'd had a first wife who died, 8 kids, a few did not survive, and then new wife, more kids. And it's a lot of kids, and a mother-in-law.
A lot of kids.
You tell me, and a mother-in-law.
Yeah.
So I would just say to everybody, when you think about this, what the meaning of this revolution and what it means in the context of today, think about a zillion kids and what it takes to do a midnight ride.
Well, there's another angle. One of our colleagues, I don't know who wrote this to us.
I think it might be Jamie.
16 kids. No wonder he volunteered to ride around on a horse. Needed to get out of the house.
Listen, it's and it was fascinating. Yes, I see that point. I just think it's also interesting, like the experience of women in that time waiting for news. You couldn't text. You couldn't, like, where do you go? Where do you go for safety? Just revisiting these things that I learned about in history class with a different lens is always helpful. I'm like, did he love her? Did he write her love notes? He did write her love notes.
I'm sorry, go, Margaret.
No, they did. But I thought it was fascinating that when he came back after 48 hours, as you said, where she had no idea where he was, she said, get everything, get packing, get out of Dodge. We have to leave Boston right away. This is because he thought he'd be implicated in the ride of Paul Revere?
Yeah, and he had to go to the next spot, right? So he was sort of like sending for her to say, get everything together because now we're gonna have to go. And I would highly recommend reading some of these books I mentioned in the story about just those hours, right? Like, what are the hours after? Because he comes back after 48 hours, not just a night, and then apparently he leaves again for 2 weeks to set things up. So, like, I just keep thinking, in a world in which you cannot communicate, how do you communicate? And the network of people who were behind in Boston, like what they must have been telling each other. So I just always invite you, when you look at history, to say, but what about that relationship? How are they getting along?
By the way, on a serious note, and there is a serious note in there, and a related note, we had Ken Burns and Sarah Botstein on, who were obviously doing the American Revolution thing. And the day after we had them on was the day after we went to Symphony Hall,
yes,
where GBH sponsored this thing, and there was a panel with the two of them and some great historians from Harvard that our boss Susan Goldberg chaired. And one of the things Sarah said, they spent a huge amount of time in the documentary, which is coming out in November, talking about women, kids, and people of color who were basically almost totally excised from the history of the American Revolution. So a different angle from you, but doing something, filling in some holes that need some filling,
Well, I have to tell you, one of the first questions I had also about who might have been caring for all those children was there like slavery in this home? Like, what was happening in this home? Because I think when you look critically at the history of Boston and the Revolution, and you begin to go beyond what we might have learned years ago, it's important to get all of these angles. And I'm grateful that Ken Burns is incorporating all of these perspectives, because there's so much we don't know and so much we haven't considered.
By the way, when you mentioned Hamilton, I was surprised too that so much of the musical Hamilton was about the love story first between him and the Schuyler sister, who gave him up to marry a rich guy, and then he wound up with the second sister, and the one he wasn't in love with. Sad.
It's messy, and it did make me hope that we get a Rachel Revere movie.
Yeah.
By the way, the version of that I read, I don't want to rain on your parade, is when he came home after 48 hours, she had changed the locks. So I have no idea all I'm saying. So can we discuss some of your spectacular columns?
Yeah.
Marjorie and I both alit, is that the right word? Alit?
I don't know.
We both agreed this was the one that we should start with. What do I do when men mistake my friendliness with flirting? So tell the story of this woman who's in her 40s, happily married, 2 great kids. What happened with her?
So she just sounds like a really nice person.
She does.
funny is that particularly here in Boston, where people are being incredibly friendly but might outwardly seem like they're not nice people, this is confusing, right? To people that she is perhaps extroverted, kind, paying attention to them. That is mistaken for flirting. One of the first comments I saw was somebody saying, I think she's Midwestern, which cracked me up because, again, regionally speaking, we might have a very different way of communicating. Ways in which I felt unfriendly, not by choice, but unintentionally unfriendly in Maryland. I do not seem unfriendly in Boston. So I was meant to live here, I think. You're just a little icier here. So yeah, I had a lot of empathy also because I think it's hard when you grow up and are a full adult to make new friends. And if everybody assumes that you're hitting on them, that is uncomfortable. So I wanted, her to talk about her life, let people know, but not change herself because, that this is. It's who she is. I wouldn't want her to dial that back too much.
And but while she is a woman, I hope I'm not going to get crushed by the two of you. Couldn't the same letter have been written to you by a guy in his 40s who's happily married, whatever her facts were, my life is fulfilled, etc. Yes. Who, yes, it could.
Absolutely. It could, absolutely. And I think the last time I was on, we talked about a letter written by a man who had a friendship at work and didn't really know how to navigate the end of a friendship at work.
Right.
Because he was sort of like, well, I thought we were friends, right? And he doesn't want to be creepy. He doesn't want to overstep because this was an office friendship that ended. He didn't quite know why. But I think everyone has trouble, especially when they're coupled, especially when they're older, especially when other people are coupled, to say, I want to know you and I want to be nice to you, but I'm not trying to date you. And I think this is also, this says a lot about our culture, right? Where we jump to that conclusion. But I do think there are some people who just are much more, they might be a hugger. They might be someone who compliments the way you look. They might be, and it's not their fault. They're just great like that. So I think to have room for the discomfort to navigate this stuff, it's the same as people might maybe thinking I don't like them when in fact I'm just in a bad mood that day.
How about the thing you just mentioned? I bet you we've discussed this with you in the past. I'm sure you've written about it. Is it okay to say to somebody, a coworker, you look fabulous today?
Here's my personal take on it. I love being told I look fabulous. I don't like comments about body or weight, or I think I think there's a way to compliment someone when it's about their style, and I think it's always, especially if you're in a workplace situation, like when somebody tells me I've chosen a great outfit, I seem great. When they tell me I look a certain way in my body, I feel like that's none of your business. So there's a way to tell somebody they look great without being weird about it.
Okay. No, your breasts are perky today, talk. Is that essentially? That's not good.
So. Or even like you look tired or you look good. Like all of these things are judgments, and they're But when somebody, especially for somebody like me who is like always in sweatpants, when someone is like, wow, you did it. And actually, I will speaking of the last time I was on, I had actually kind of put it together that day, and you guys said my hair looked great. And I was like, you know what? I was on cloud. I was walking on air for a day because for somebody like me, I'm like, oh, I was for my effort.
Yeah.
Talking to Meredith Goldstein from the Boston Globe, love letters.
So I love this one. This is a woman who's just gotten back into the dating life. She's older. She's in her 60s.
Oh, I like this one too.
The guy she is dating kind of wants to spend their dates hanging around Costco. Also.
Who wouldn't want to go to Costco on a date? Are you kidding me?
Well, let's all take a moment and say that Costco is a great date.
It is a great date.
But I do understand. I thought it was really revealing for this woman that she's back in the dating world, and she's not obviously looking for like the kind of partner that you do errands with. She's still in a place where she wants to like go to museums, go to sports games, and she really wants to like do a bunch of stuff, go to events. And she said something I thought was hilarious, which we can turn to you, Jim, to ask. She said, I know most men want to do one thing per weekend, like one thing, not two things. And I was like, wow, is that true that they're like gendered? I can only do one thing. I thought of it more as like an age thing of I'm at a point where I like having one social day and one not social day.
Right.
Is
yes.
So I didn't think of it as a gendered proposition of, but I do wonder eventually, if you date someone long enough, you're going to wind up at Costco. You're going to wind up at the dry cleaner. You're going to wind up at Lowe's. You're going to wind up picking out garden supplies. So she just might not be ready for a Costco relationship.
Can I tell you something? As a Costco-ophile, probably my younger daughter and I go regularly together as one of our great outings. Not quite a date, but it's a variation on a theme. It is a multifaceted, fun experience, from the eating to the people watching to the aisle walking to the, oh my God, what a fabulous deal on wine. It is spectacular.
It's also revealing because are you with the kind of person who gets sucked into buying everything? Like I go to a Costco and I'm like, well, maybe I do need 8 pounds of blah. for bagels, I will never eat, right? I need 100,000 socks, and you get to know, is somebody able to walk past something they might like? I will spend 4 times as much money at Costco because everything's cool looking.
Exactly.
So it's like a more revealing date, perhaps, than the symphony.
You have to buy the chicken, even if you don't eat chicken, because it's $5.99. Now, we have a letter that has not gotten to you yet, from what I understand.
That's right.
But we figured we'd share it with you and get your perspective.
Okay.
It's signed by Coach in Crisis. Okay.
Oh no.
I just turned 73, Meredith. Recently retired from a long, high-stress job in pro sports. Now I'm dealing with the college kids. Let's just say I'm more familiar with fourth downs than downward dogs. Now I'm dating someone new. She's 24. Endlessly energetic and thinks stretching on the beach at sunrise is romantic bonding. I think it's an ambush. And then I'll skip ahead. Here's the rub, literally. She insists I join her for partner stretches in public. On the sand, in front of joggers, she calls it love. I call it losing all cartilage dignity. Meredith, is it okay to love someone but hate the idea of doing hamstring pulls in front of strangers? Or do I need to limber up and lean in? Now, by the way, we asked Jamie to write that. He didn't. AI produced that brilliant,
did a wonderful job,
incredible.
Wow.
But what we wanted to get to is Bill Belichick did turn 73 the other day. I don't know if we've ever discussed this with you. I'm sure we did. Jordan, whatever, is 24. That, I can do the math for you because it's one of the areas in which I have some skill. That is a 49-year differential. Where are you on massive relationship age differentials, Meredith Goldstein?
I just don't, it's hard, right? Because I hear that number and I'm like, wow, that's a very big difference. I also I don't have a place where I can say, well, that's the number that.
I agree with that.
Right? I don't know. I also think that, okay, I'm going to speak very, I'm referring to no one in particular when I say this, but like, let's say you have invested most of your life in being the coach of a team, right? And you haven't given much space to relationships, perhaps. Like maybe one person is less developed in their relationship experience and how they've prioritized it, I should say. So I'm not endorsing or saying it's terrible. I'm just saying that for everybody, as long as it's like, this is a boring answer, but we know our own limits. I mean, I've seen some relationships with pretty big age gaps work better than peers, and vice versa. But I also understand why it makes people uncomfortable, and I also understand why after a certain point you say, how can you, what do you share? But the truth is, I wouldn't have a place to say, oh, over this many years it's weird, because if everybody's an adult, everybody's an adult. So
isn't there a whole podcast about this, about huge age gaps between men and women? Or I just heard something about this somewhere. These women were interviewed that were with men that are 20, 30, 40 years older than they are.
I don't think that, I'm with Meredith on this thing. If they're good and everybody's safe, healthy, 50 years, though, is a lot of years.
It's the double standard that gets me.
I knew it. Yep.
Because if
you're totally right.
The woman were 73 and the man were 24, come on, everyone would be horrified.
I think there's a lot of judgment to go around, no matter who's what. Even the fact that we're talking about it, right? We're not without, we don't skip over these conversations in the way that we used to. I remember seeing movies, what was that movie? It was like maybe Sean Connery and Catherine Zeta-Jones, and I can't remember that. Movies where it didn't even...
Entrapment?
I didn't think twice.
John, you're amazing. Thank you. Go ahead.
I didn't think twice about an age gap in a film because I was so used to it. Now I'm frequently seeing women around my age with, late 40s with younger men in movies. I do think there has been progress. And certainly in the real world and among letter writers, I see a lot more older women with younger men than I ever have, even if the age gap is 3 to 10 years where it has evened out a little bit, I think, depending on where you live as well. So I do see it generationally changing, where people are lonely and they want good company, and good company comes in all forms.
Do you ever try having AI write a response to a letter writer?
No, but I will tell you that early in dating, my boyfriend did have asked ChatGPT to give a Meredith answer and then showed me. And I was like a little bit horrified because it can do that a little bit. It didn't have my beautiful personal touches and my warmth, but I was laughing at
That's pretty good.
At the time.
We're talking to Meredith Goldstein.
So I want to play a little sound from the podcast. Your season, if I'm wrong, has been about can people change? But this one is about hot flashes, perimenopause. Eileen on the Love Letters podcast talking to you, Meredith, about her hot flash experience. Here she is.
I think I had them a lot in bed. I remember my ex saying to me, because I would throw off the blankets, like I wanted the blanket, but I didn't want the blanket, and she would always say to me, I can feel your leg. You're putting your leg out. She was very sensitive. And I was like, I'm not putting my leg out. So I remember doing that for a while.
That is a great soundbite. By the way, that is great.
So
I loved it. I love this episode, and I love talking to this woman.
So what is the takeaway from this?
I wanted to go into, in the context of can people change? There are some changes we don't ask for and we get anyway. We're going to go into perimenopause and menopause whether or not we want to. How does it change you? And is it all terrible? And the truth is, many people I spoke to told me it was not all terrible. And in this particular case, this woman, Eileen, figures out that being at that place in her life makes her a better dater. So she's married, she gets a divorce. She gets a divorce basically when she's in perimenopause and then starts dating again really after menopause. And she kind of makes better decisions. That's partly just because of maturity and life experience, but it's also hormonally everything. She's like a changed person, and it lets her find a really wonderful love. So if you want an uplifting story about what menopause can do for your love life, check that one out. I left in a very good mood.
And what was the overall conclusion of the season? I know you just talked to that woman from Wharton about people's lives changing. We can change.
We can, and sometimes when we can't, that's okay too. So there are absolutely small changes we can make. We can make some big changes. It's all possible, and some of it is also accepting what's a little bit out of our control, all of which we know, but this season has really helped me figure out, well, what's in my control and what isn't. And this is actually, I think, one of the seasons where I've learned the most, where I think some of the expectations I had for myself for change might have been unreasonable.
Are you as rational in your real life as you are in your professional life? I don't mean that as a joke, by the way. I mean it totally sincerely.
I mean, sometimes that it's masking like the inside thoughts of, oh no. And that's so often when I'm in a panic and I have a massive question about my life, I then make it a podcast season. So I can be rational because before this season, I was like, will I ever change? Please tell me I can change. And then what you see is the panic channeled for good.
I love that. What a great job, Meredith. What a great job.
You have a pretty good job, too.
I do have a pretty good job.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's helped me psychologically, though. I'm not sure if it's done that, Jim.
I think it has. I think
so?
I think you're a healthier, fuller human being.
Yeah, all right. Okay. Meredith, thank you.
Meredith, you're great.
More
Thanks
great
so
columns,
much.
and the season on changing has been great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
We've been speaking.
Do you ever go to Costco, by the way? Have you ever been to Costco?
Once.
Once?
I know. I should get there.
BJ's nothing?
I should go there more often because, they're doing great things on DEI and stuff. But
they are, and they treat their workers well.
I should get there.
It's also a great
I don't know
experience.
where they are. Are they near me somewhere?
You know what you do? You type into this computer machine thing, and you go to Google, and you ask locations, and you whatever. I'm aggravating Marjorie. Goodbye, Meredith.
Thank you very
much,
Meredith.
See you. Take
We've been
care.
speaking with Boston Globe Love Letters and advice columnist and podcast host Meredith Goldstein, and the podcast is the Love Letters podcast as well. This whole season has been about whether or not you can change. You can get a lot of information from it. Coming after a quick break yesterday, Jim didn't have time to share his thing. Today I'm making it up. We're skipping one more thing for a much better cause. Environmentalist Bill McKibben is going to be with us because he's going to be in Boston this Saturday for an event at the Old North Church. He's going to tell us all about that. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Filmmaker Isaiah Saxon grew up exploring redwood forests and looking out for Sasquatch.
You think that you're seeing things, and you think that you might be one step away from the great magical experience.
I'm Ari Shapiro. Isaiah Saxon has filmed The Legend of Ochi and the Magic of Nature on the next All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And Porter Square Books, hosting Alyssa Altman with her new book, Permission, about the craft of memoir writing and the ethics of storytelling. April 30th at 7. Registration information at portersquarebooks.com. And the Newman School in the heart of Back Bay, dedicated to being a spirited community for local and global teachers and learners, now enrolling middle school day students and 5-day boarding high school students. NewmanBoston.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're live at the library tomorrow, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. One final time, we promised you we'd be joined by the governor tomorrow. She had a conflict. She is rescheduled for May 9th from noon to 1, live at the library. Today, we're not doing two more things because we're doing one more thing with environmentalist Bill McKibben. Bill will join us for a longer conversation on May 8th, but he joins us on the phone now to talk about a multi-faith service happening this Saturday at Old North Church. It's one of many events leading up to Sun Day, not Sunday, Sun Day, which is a global day of climate action happening this fall that'll celebrate the power of renewable energy to lead the world away from this fossil fuel nightmare. Bill, good to talk to you.
Well, good to talk with you as always, and many thanks. We're very excited about Saturday night. It's really the official launch of this Sunday effort, and we're doing it in Boston. And the mayor is going to be there to light a green lantern up in Paul Revere's steeple and send out the word that we are ready for. We're ready for the next revolution that needs to come. A revolution, we've spent a lot of time over the years, the three of us, talking about the climate crisis that we're in and talking about the one real way out that we have, which is the rapid deployment of sun and wind and batteries. Well, we're going to light that lantern with the battery off a solar panel, and the mayor is going to flip the switch, and at the same time, they're turning on the green lights on the Zachem Bridge and
great.
Hall, and you people will think that the Celtics have won already when they go up.
So, by the way, let me be clear. This Saturday, April 26th, Old North Church, beginning at 6:30. And Bill is on a list of. So go ahead. I'm sorry, Bill.
I was going to say it starts with a wonderful multi-faith service with a lot of really interesting people. Some of your listeners will know the wonderful Diana Butler Bass, who really is one of the truly prophetic voices in the country. She'll be there, and a bunch of other people, including Reverend Lennox Yearwood from the Hip Hop Caucus, and Antonique Smith, the Grammy-nominated singer and who sort of leads climate work in the Black Church, but she'll be there to sing her version of Here Comes the Sun. And I think it'll be a spectacular service and segue immediately into this kind of launch moment for the whole Sunday thing across the country, starting from Boston and Old North on Saturday night.
Bill McKibben, can people just show up for this, or is this an invite-only kind of deal?
No tickets, just show up.
Just show up. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Can I ask you one thing while we have you? I know you're coming back in a couple of weeks, but one thing that has put me over the edge, which is almost everything, but one thing in particular, I was discussing with a nonprofit leader the other day, the latest possible executive order or action coming out of Trump that the Internal Revenue Code be amended so that tax-exempt organizations can no longer include any organization, the subject matter of their work being climate. Bill McKibben is laughing if you can't hear it in the background. Is this real or is this an illusion?
Yeah, it may well be. We heard all these same stories, and it would make complete sense. I mean, look what they've done so far.
Yeah.
They declared that we have an energy emergency, but that we won't even include sun and wind in the definition of energy. They systematically gutted the science, bureaucracy of the federal government. They shut down the funding last week for Princeton's gold standard climate research, and the letter that they sent said, "We're shutting it down because your findings about the climate are leading to climate anxiety among young people."
Oh, God.
And now they're having. I mean, it's like a heist movie, really. They've committed this crime, and now as of today, they're shutting down some of the marine buoys that measure the temperature. It's like they're spraying black paint on the surveillance cameras so nobody can watch the heist in progress. Their antipathy towards physics and chemistry is boundless. And yeah, I'm sure it's a matter of time before they do their best to silence the people who've been trying to call them out.
On the other side,
that's why we're on offense here too. We can play defense against all that, but the offense is solar panels and windmills.
Well, and conversations, a small piece of offense. We just got off Zoom about a half hour ago with the president of Mount Holyoke College, who not only has been standing up to Trump, but told us later today there's a conference that she is chairing or running on feminists and climate change.
Yeah.
So everybody does what they can do in whatever jurisdiction they can do it.
Look, it's been beautiful to watch all kinds of, that letter that went out from colleges standing up for academic freedom is beautiful. And it comes, I'm proud because one of the people who got it going around was someone you guys need to get to know, Lori Patton, who just left as president of Middlebury College and has taken over the American Academy of Arts and Sciences in Cambridge.
That's right.
We will do. Bill McKibben.
Beautiful stuff happening. See you Saturday, guys.
Saturday,
very,
6:30, Old North
us.
Church. We will see you then. Bill, really appreciate your time. Talk to you soon. See you Saturday night.
That, of course, was Bill McKibben that we were speaking to, and the event is Saturday, Old North Church, 6:30.
Quite
for
a
info.
cast, too.
Go to oldnorth-com.
But you don't need tickets, as Bill said. You can just show up, too.
Okay, coming up after the 1 o'clock news, the NAACP's Michael Curry joins us. He's going to talk about what's going on at Kearney Hospital in Dorchester and federal cuts, of course. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
On Thursday, May 15th, we'll be honoring the mother figure in your life at our next Stories from the Stage event. It's all happening live at our studios in Brighton. Tickets available at gbh.org/events.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Liberty Mutual Insurance. Liberty believes progress happens when people feel secure and exists to help people embrace today and pursue tomorrow. Learn more at libertymutual.com. And the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds from medical bills, uncashed paychecks, savings accounts, and more. To see if you have any unclaimed money, you can visit findmassmoney.gov.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, head on Hour 3 of Boston Public Radio. NAACP and community health leader Michael Curry joins to discuss the fate of Kearney Hospital in Dorchester. He was the leader of a working group appointed by the governor to provide recommendations for the hospital shuttered in the wake of the Stewart healthcare scandal. Plus, he'll run down the history of MLK Jr.'s march in Boston 60 years ago and the connections to today, which will play out at Saturday's rally.
I'm Marjorie Egan, and my and Tony V's favorite day of the week. Am I the a-hole day? We all know someone who loves getting to the airport early, but is one host a real jerk for kicking her guests out 11 hours before their flight so she can catch up on her rest? We'll open the lines to ask you, what's the expectation on a day of departure for guests and hosts? It's all next in the third hour of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. President Trump says he believes Russia and Ukraine want to end their war despite Moscow's strikes on Kyiv overnight.
I think they both want to make peace. I do believe so. There's a lot of hatred there. There's a lot of very bad blood, a lot of distrust. But I think I hope we're going to get there for the sake of a lot of young people that are dying.
On the matter of the U.S. trade war with China, Trump said talks with Beijing are underway, even though China's government has said that is not the case. NPR's Asma Khalid explains it's not clear the president is changing policy with China just yet, but he is changing his tone.
This week, we've heard the president and some of his top economic advisors acknowledge that the high tariff rates with China are not sustainable over the long run. Trump told reporters that the 145% rate on goods imported from China will come down substantially, but he hasn't given a number. The president says he wants to make a deal with China and is projecting optimism. And here he was Wednesday at the White House.
We are going to have a fair deal with China. It's going to be fair.
This all comes amidst the economic uncertainty the Trump tariffs have sparked. But thus far, the subtle change in tone has not led to any actual change in tariff or trade policy. Asma Khalid, NPR News.
China launched 3 astronauts into space today, the latest in a series of missions to the country's space station. We have more on this from NPR's John Ruwich.
Every 6 months, China swaps out the 3-person crew aboard the Tiangong space station, more than 200 miles up. Thursday's mission, Shenzhou 20, is the 9th such mission. The new crew will overlap for a few days with the existing team, then that crew will head back home after half a year in orbit. On board, the 3-man team will conduct a range of scientific experiments. They'll also do some work outside of the space station, including installing devices to protect it from space debris. The crew rotations aboard Tiangong are expected to continue several more years. They're part of a fast-developing space program with big ambitions, including putting a human back on the moon by the end of the decade. John Ruwich, NPR News, Shanghai.
Israel's commemorating 80 years since the Holocaust. The morning after flags were lowered to half-staff at a remembrance ceremony, sirens wailed in memory of the millions of people killed by Nazi Germany and its allies during World War II. For a moment, traffic stopped and people were seen bowing their heads. The country observing a moment of silence. At Auschwitz, October 7th hostage families joined Holocaust survivors and bereaved families for the annual March of the Living in Poland. At last check on Wall Street, the Dow Jones Industrial Average was up 438 points, more than 1%. From Washington, this is NPR News.
And from the GBH Radio Newsroom in Boston, I'm Judy Ewell. Massachusetts Congressman Jim McGovern has announced that his daughter, Molly, died unexpectedly while visiting a friend in Italy. McGovern, his wife Lisa, their son Patrick, saying in a statement that Molly faced a rare cancer diagnosis with courage, optimism, and tenacity. They say Molly had just finished a semester abroad in Australia when she passed away in Italy while visiting a good friend. The McGovern said Molly had the rare gift of making everybody feel special, and she will always be the soul of their family. Governor Healey offered her condolences, saying she's heartbroken, and everyone is feeling the sadness of Molly being taken too soon. If you drive into Boston on the Mass Pike or I-93, you may be seeing signs on bridges protesting the Trump administration. A group of activists calling themselves the Boston Bridge Brigade have started posting anti-Trump signs a few times a week. A sign on a bridge on Savin Hill this morning reads, "Due process and justice for all." Organizer Emma Johnstetter says they're trying to show opponents of President Trump's policies that there are ways to get involved.
For me, it's about letting people know that this is not okay, first of all. That people know that we're not just sitting home and just waiting for somebody else to do something.
The group is currently posting signs on bridges in Dorchester and Newton. In sports, the Red Sox host the Mariners this afternoon, a beautiful spring day for a ball game. Sunny with afternoon temps in the 60s, clouds tonight, lows in the 50s. Mostly sunny tomorrow, highs in the low 70s right now, 59 in Boston. This is GBH.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. As a fiduciary, Fisher Investments is obligated to act in their client's best interest. Learn more at FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss. This is NPR.
Welcome back to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Tomorrow we're going to be back at the Boston Public Library. Andrew Cabral, Shirley Young, Press Play with Adam Riley and Sue O'Connell. We're going to be talking about the almost collapse here of CBS News. And for Live Music Friday, rapper, author, and educator Paul Willis. Hello again, Jim.
Can I just say, when I was unaware of what we both just heard from Judy on the news, Jim McGovern's daughter Molly dying in Italy, had been ill. I have to say, he is one of the most decent, honorable, hardworking human beings I've ever known in my life. Does more on food insecurity issues probably than anybody in the United States in Congress out. Is a really caring person, and we both want to express our sympathy to Jim and his family for the loss of Molly,
their
his
daughter.
Kid. Really horrible. In any case, we're joined now on a Zoom by Michael Curry. Michael's the CEO of the Mass League of Community Health Centers, on the board of the National NAACP. He is also a scheduled speaker at Saturday's rally on Boston Common. We discussed it with Janae Osterhelt and Amari Paris Jeffries yesterday. We're going to talk about it more today. It's commemorating 60 years since the Boston Freedom Rally led by Martin Luther King Jr. Michael's going to talk about that history in a few minutes. Michael, good to see you. Thanks for your time.
Good to see you both.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. So you are the co-chair of that working group up at Kearney Hospital that was shut down, but you're going to keep providing healthcare services. What's the story up there?
Yeah, one is just credit to the 32 members of the group that Governor Healy and Mayor Wu pulled together. It was phenomenal to co-chair that group of thought leaders, of community activists, of policy experts, legislators or elected officials, and then to co-chair that with what I think is one of the baddest public health officials in the country, Dr. Ojikutu, who leads the Boston Public Health Commission. We should have never been here. So I want to remind people, this is not normal. I just left UMass Boston with Dr. Geronimus, the author of Weathering, where I moderated a panel. This is weathering. We should never get used to hospitals closing. We should never get used to access being limited for communities of color and poor communities. So one is, I just want to acknowledge that we should have never lost Neshoba and Kearney Hospital. It's abuse, it's a lack of oversight, a lot of factors. But this 32-member group got together, and the findings are probably not shocking to some, that we won't be able to replace the hospital system, the recommendation speaks to, but we can make sure that there's healthcare services being provided out of that facility. That we can make sure that we're getting healthcare services combined with other social needs, because we know, Marjorie, it's not just about getting you access to a physician or nurse or other providers. It's about also addressing your food insecurity, your housing insecurity, all the things that are driving your health status. That's 80% of that upstream. So there's a solid conversation as a part of this report about reimagining that Kearney site in a way that is just about continuing access to healthcare services, but also providing the additional services that would make Dorchester a healthier community. And then I was pleased, as a leader of the Community Health Center movement, that the report highlights the role, the unfortunate burden that health centers and other providers have had to play by stepping in to provide care for those patients and staff who were destabilized by the closure.
When you said we can at least make sure that these services are provided, you mean those with financing can make sure that these things happen. There has to be a buy-in from the city and the state to make these recommendations real, correct?
Yeah, I mean, the work of the group is to reimagine, right? Is to maybe do a little getting under the hood to unpack what happened and then provide a path forward. I will tell you, exhaustive work. We scanned across the country what works, what other cities and towns have done in the case of their hospitals closed. But once you provide the roadmap of what's possible, it is going to take policymakers, on every level, city and state level, as well as voters and constituents, Jim, because I don't like to give all the weight to the elected officials.
Oh, you're right.
The weight belongs in the residents of Boston, and particularly the residents of Dorchester, to now take this plan, this recommendation, as well as others that may come up, and then push forward with what they need within the community. Reuse of the Kearney site, I said, must include high quality health care and social services that meet the needs of community health and social needs. I want to stress those terms. Community health needs, social needs is a key part of what the report points out.
So when you say healthcare services, are you saying this is going to be like a neighborhood health care center where you can, do strep throat tests or earache tests or basic health care?
Like a community health center that he runs.
But you're not going to be operating on anybody's heart or anything like that. And that's what you mean?
I think it's community health centers plus, right? So it's primary care access, right? So that's community health centers that provide that service and others. It's urgent care. Some community health centers provide urgent care services. And plus is behavioral health services and expanding the capacity for us to meet the behavioral health needs of our communities. I'd say that the answer is D, right? If you
All
take an exam. The answer is D, right?
Yeah, okay.
When you my mic clicked out for about a second and a half there. When you were talking about this never should have happened to begin with, Michael Curry, I don't know if you or Marjorie, did we mention the name Stewart?
No, we haven't.
This is all because of the grotesque irresponsibility and some of us believe clearly the criminality of Ralph De La Torre and others. So it never should have happened. Was there a budget? Do you have any idea how much this is going to cost to effectuate what you're talking about?
Yeah, I think that wasn't really our charge. The charge of policymakers is then to turn sort of these conceptual things into the possibilities of what can be done with that site. And by the way, the site is owned by others. So there is an entity that owns this site. So there's a whole other level of conversation that involves zoning, that involves the ownership that now needs to happen, and reimagining now needs to turn to action. And I'm hoping that is the case.
The reason I asked you about the funding issue is I hope people have followed this Stewart abomination that incredibly, as we discussed with Brian McGorry the other day, has not led to any indictments except in Malta so far, which I don't quite understand. Just to give you a sense of the grotesque self-enrichment. I'm sure people read Brian McGorry's columns about the yachts and the planes and that sort of thing. I'm just reading here, in the bankruptcy filing that Stewart did, one of the payments was a $37 million payment for management fees, in quotes, to a company that De La Torre had created where he owned a 40% stake. So from that alone, he was able to get $15+ million. What would $15 million do to help rejuvenate this site in the image that you and your colleagues talked about, Michael Curry?
100%, $15 million would be a good down payment to renovate that site, to build it out into a healthcare facility that meets the needs of Dorchester. It is a shame, and I'll say it again, a shame that this was an abuse, that this may have been some self-dealing. I am deeply disturbed by it, and we need to make sure it never happens again in Massachusetts.
Talking to Michael Curry.
So, Michael Curry, when Trump was president the first time around, he talked about lowering prescription drug prices. We pay a lot more than other developed countries do in the United States. And then he met with the pharmaceutical people, and he did a 180, and it never happened.
Can you stay on that 1 second? I have fear that people with short memories are going to think you're exaggerating.
No, it's true.
He went into a meeting in the Oval Office in January of his first term saying, I'm going to lower pharmaceutical prices. I'm going to talk these pharma execs into it. When the meeting was over, he had changed his position on the issue.
He's putting more tariffs on again today. The tariffs are off, now they're on again. They're on, they're off, they're on, they're off. Anyway, now he's considering lowering these amounts again on drug prices. So we don't know if this will last after the pharmaceutical industries come in. But if it does last, I mean, it's about time, right? I mean, we're getting ripped off here.
Yeah, I mean, one, as Jim mentioned, I had the phrase in my head, the emperor has no clothes. The reality is he likes to promise stuff and wield his power that he'll make people do things, right? But the reality is it's much more complicated than that. And quite frankly, it requires doing some things that are not traditionally Republican, right? Pushing back on the private sector to do right, to make affordable drugs. All those things are not things that are historically things that would come out of the party. Now, I think the interesting thing is we know that the drug price issue across the globe is inequitable, that we in this country pay much more for drugs than other countries do. I think it would shock the conscience of anyone who knew the disparity you pay versus Japan versus Holland, name the country. They pay much less for the same drug we pay much less, including our Medicaid and Medicare systems pay more. So I think reality is, one is I want to give credit to the Biden administration that really moved the needle on this before they left office. And then now Trump comes in with the conversation. I like to give out homework, Jim and Marjorie, so I'm going to give out homework today for your listeners.
Okay.
I'm sorry, this is the professor in me. There's a PBS documentary called Obama's Deal. I want all of you to go and pull up this. I think it's an hour. I show it in my Suffolk University class. It's called President Obama's Deal on Frontline. It will show you how complex it is to bring parties to the table and negotiate better discounts and more access and more affordability. Watch the documentary, and then you'll know what we're facing in this case.
By the way, we have not only discussed that documentary, John Gruber, who is now the head of the economics department at MIT, who's a regular guest here, was obviously involved in not only Romney Care, but Obamacare. And we've talked a lot about the difficulty of reining in these drug companies. And, Michael, the absurdity, the response, you know this better than we do, every time when we try to make, when the government tries to make drug prices in the United States even close to comparable to the rates in other countries, is it's going to kill innovation and research and whatever. And there's never talk about, well, maybe just spread the cost evenly around all of the purchasers, rather than just in one country here where the legislature lies down like dogs to allow these prices to go up. I mean, that's what the formula should be, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think, I always say the truth is in the middle, right? So as a longtime policy person, when you get everybody in the room, do we want to make sure there's research and development, R&D? Do we want to make sure there's innovation in the pharmaceutical industry? Do we want them to have some margin so they can invest in those things that are producing life-saving drugs for us in the future? And then maybe deal with the drugs that don't pan out, that don't reveal the benefit that maybe the researchers thought when they went into the research. Yes, we want them to do that. At the same time, we know that there are some abuses within drug pricing. We know that we pay more than we should for drugs. We know that the unaffordability of drugs will drive people away from taking life-saving medicine, and it will drive health plans and hospitals into this very financial fragility, because people can't afford to purchase the drugs. That's the ecosystem we're in, and we got to find a way through it. So I think, Jim, quite frankly, just like Obama's Deal, the documentary that everybody listening to you will watch, you got to get everybody in the room, and people have to make compromises and find a way forward and negotiate better, to your point.
Okay, so even though we didn't ask you to, you became a professor.
We're not leaving drugs yet, are we?
Oh, we are, yeah.
Oh, I just had one quick thing about the drugs. People probably remember that there was a big scandal a few years ago when EpiPens, which have been around for a while, Joe Manchin's daughter ran the company, lifted the cost of EpiPens to something like $600. And then there was insulin, and insulin's been around for decades and decades to deal with diabetes. And then there was a kind of outrageous raising of the prices of insulin. Remember, people were triaging.
Well, you know who dealt with that too, though? Joe Biden,
Yeah.
as was mentioned a minute ago by Michael Curry.
But I mean, there's kind of no excuse for that. With those drugs that have been around for years, or EpiPens too, not as long as insulin, but they've been around for a while.
And agree. And if anyone wants to be entertained, look at Representative Katie Porter's interview with the pharmaceutical executives.
Oh yeah,
class as well. Katie Porter, and look at her, and of course she grills them about the pricing. Again, I don't have any slight in this conversation for our pharmaceutical industry. I believe they do great things. They save lives, just like the frontline providers. But we have to be honest about where we are and work towards better affordability. How do we invest in innovation while we also make things affordable for patients to access?
So as I started to say, you offered yourself up as a professor a few minutes ago, gave an assignment. We're now going to ask you to become what you often are on this show, an historian, Michael Curry. As I mentioned, we had Janae Osterhelt, who's the co-chair, and Amari Parris-Jeffries from Embrace Boston, about this march and rally, Everyone 250 on Saturday, commemorating something that happened in our city 60 years ago, exactly 60 years ago. And we hoped you could spend a few minutes more than we had yesterday talking about why King was here, what the state of affairs were here. in 1965. But starting, here's a clip from Reverend King speaking on Boston Common on April 23rd, yesterday, 60 years, 1965, about the racism permeating not just the Deep South, but Boston too.
It would be demagogic and dishonest for me to say that Boston is a Birmingham, or to equate Massachusetts with Mississippi. But it would be morally irresponsible were I to remain blind to the threat to liberty, the denial of opportunity, and the crippling poverty that we face in some sections of this community.
Tell us a little bit about April of 1965 in Boston, Michael Curry, if you would.
Yeah, one is just to remember where we were in this country, right? We were still a very divided nation. It was the midpoint, or the point in the modern civil rights movement. We had come off freedom rides. We had come off the March on Washington. We were experiencing, the workings of the Civil Rights Act and the that year, the Voting Rights Act. There was civil rights in the air, right? We were having critical conversations everywhere in the country, including in Boston. We were pre-busing, right? So we were also dealing with the issues of inequities in education, even in the 1960s, before Garrity's decision on busing in the 1970s. We were dealing with systemic issues that were hundreds of years old and impacted people of color, particularly in this case. The movement was centered around African-American experience in this country. So imagine, you always hear me in the Quantum Leap presentation, close your eyes and imagine being here in April 23rd, 1965. Dr. King's coming to visit. We know he'll make some visits. He'll meet with some community leaders. He'll march from Roxbury to the Boston Commons downtown. He'll address the legislature after addressing the crowds. I want you to think about the weather that day as we look at the weather report for this Saturday. It was cool, partly cloudy. If you remember, there's an iconic picture of a brother from Boston holding an umbrella over his head as he gave his remarks. I want you to remember, because 22,000 people marched. 22,000 people were on the Common to receive him, and he delivered powerful remarks. Now, he understood that Boston was not Mississippi. I use the phrase, we're better than the worst. We're the best of the worst. So Mississippi sucked, but Boston sucked too. And the reality was we had inequities here. So he knew that if Boston is always in this unique position. If we can crack the code here, we can crack the code anywhere in the country, because we can set the trend on health reform, on education equality, on housing, on name the area, on environmental justice. So he knew that coming here was critical, because it gave momentum to the movement. Of course, he would be assassinated just a few years later, same year of my birth. But when he came and he addressed the legislature, and I want to reference Reverend Dr. Michael Haynes, who all of us should know his name, like we know Dr. King's name, introduced Dr. King that day when he spoke to the state legislature. We need to celebrate tomorrow, commemorate tomorrow. It'll ground us in the work we need to do going forward, and give us some hope.
So what's happening Saturday? Sponsored by Everyone 250. You can go to the Embrace Boston site or everyone250.org and get the details. But give us you're one of the speakers on the program on Saturday. Give us a sense of what's happening.
Yeah, so one is you had who I believe is one of the most rare leaders to come across us in our lifetimes is Amari Parris Jeffries. I think he's a visionary, and I think, quite frankly, he's an organizer and a convener in a way that I've rarely seen in my 56 years on this earth, right? I've read about them, but Amari can call any of us, and we say yes. No matter what our political, ideological differences are, our perspectives on the struggle or how to approach the struggle. So one is Embrace Boston, which I serve on the board for, which Amari leads. We'll host that rally tomorrow on the Parkman Bandstand.
Saturday.
Oh, Saturday. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I said tomorrow. I'm thinking it's Friday.
Saturday. Yep.
Saturday on the Parkman Bandstand. So 100 organizations are behind this. And you mentioned it. The mayor will be there. Our mayor, Michelle Wu, the president and CEO of the American City Coalition, and the lead pastor of the 12th Baptist Church, Reverend Willie Bodrick, who's a phenomenal leader as well. I have the honor and privilege of being in the mix with these folks. ACLU, Massachusetts. There'll be some great folks, great speakers that'll bring you history, bring you perspective. And quite frankly, Jim and Marjorie, if we ever needed this, we need it now. Because you can turn on your television, turn on the radio, and it is depressing. We are being set back in time. We're losing gains. And Dr. King, if he were alive today, he'd be in Boston. And he'd be visiting that bandstand again.
Michael Curry, as always.
Thank you.
Can't thank you enough for your thoughts and your time. And we will see you on Saturday on the Comment over there.
Thank you. And great to see you, 250 most influential. See you together. I was excited to see that.
Well, wait a second. Who else is one of the most 150 most influential?
I'm just a bill sitting on Capitol Hill.
Excuse me. Congratulations to you, Michael. Pretty good company for us, I should say.
We were thrilled.
Michael, great to see you. We'll see you in a couple of days. Take care, Michael Curry. Take care.
Bye. We have been speaking with Michael Curry, CEO of the Mass League of Community Health Centers, on the board of the National NAACP. He's also the scheduled speaker at Saturday's rally on Boston Common to commemorate 60 years of the Boston Freedom Rally, led by Martin Luther King. Okay, coming up. When a host is pushed to her limit, she kindly informs her guests to entertain themselves. Is she an a-hole or an all-American hero? We'll ask you next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. It is our Am I the A-hole Thursday afternoon segment. That is next.
Filmmaker Isaiah Saxon grew up exploring redwood forests and looking out for Sasquatch.
You think that you're seeing things and you think that you might be one step away from the great magical experience.
I'm Ari Shapiro. Isaiah Saxon has filmed The Legend of Ochi and the Magic of Nature on the next All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And the Boston Speakers Series, announcing its upcoming season at Symphony Hall for 7 evenings, including Dr. Anthony Fauci, Ken Burns, outlier author Malcolm Gladwell, and geopolitical economist Pippa Malmgren. BostonSpeakers.org. And the Hanover Theater, presenting The Moth Main Stage, an event that celebrates the diversity and commonality of the human experience through true live storytelling. April 25th at the Hanover Theater. Tickets at thehanovertheater.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marge Regan and Jim Browdy live at the library tomorrow, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. You know, I should have mentioned when Michael Curry was going down the list of people who will be on the speaking program at Saturday's March and Rally, he mentioned Reverend Liz Walker, who we also know, in addition to being a brilliant and inspirational reverend, was probably one of the most celebrated news anchors here ever on Channel 4. She's going to be with us on Monday. She's written a memoir, No One Left Alone, a story of how community helps us heal. Again, Reverend Walker, Liz Walker, will join us on Monday on Boston Public Radio. Well, welcome to another round of Am I the A-hole, which is not a sting operation to crucify comedian Tony V, despite what he thinks. Here's Tony from our show yesterday.
I just assumed that I was here for a segment of Who's the A-hole, and I assumed it was me. So in any situation, I figured, oh yeah, that's why they're bringing me in. It's like one of those when they arrest people by giving them ball game tickets. You know, they go, oh, you want a ticket to the ball game? You're under arrest. I figured you were bringing me in, and they go, you're the A-hole. I go, what situation? And they'll go, every situation.
That was...
He's a riot.
He is a riot.
Yeah.
In any case, here's the real situation for today. The number's 877-301-8970. I love this one, by the way. A husband and wife are playing host to some friends who are staying for the weekend. Okay. Anticipating that they're going to be burned out from entertaining and hosting, the hosts make arrangements to take that Monday off from work, which is totally reasonable. Would you agree so far? Totally reasonable. You need a break on Monday.
That's right.
Unfortunately for the hosts, though, their weekend guests catch wind of this development and without invitation change their previously scheduled Sunday flight to a Monday evening red-eye. It's cheaper, and they know their friends are going to be available. So, not feeling up for another day of hosting, The wife in the host couple informs the visiting couple that she will be, quote, taking them to the airport as early as 8 a.m. on Monday morning so I can have my day of rest like I planned. Big surprise. This blows up in her face as the friends say they're content to just relax at the house. The Monday flights were cheaper. The host says in a word, go pound sand. It's actually 3 words. Here's the number, 877-301-8970. Who's the a-hole? Is it a host who's curt with her guests and supposed friends and says, essentially, I'm kicking you out at the agreed upon time? Or is it these deadweight friends who assume they could overstay their welcome without any blowback? So, and our number again is 877-301-8970. Who's the a-hole, Marjorie?
I think that the people that asked to stay over on Monday night to take the red eye on Monday night should expect that she's got stuff she has to do on Monday, so they can, as she offered to do, leave their luggage at her house, but go do something so she doesn't have to take them on a tour again on Monday.
So who's the a-hole?
Well, I guess.
Here we go again. Oh my God.
I think.
Who's the a-hole, Marjorie?
I think that the guests are the a-holes.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
Okay.
Marjorie's position.
Okay.
And which, by the way, is a changed position from what she had this morning.
It is?
It's fine. It's obviously some time has passed. You've changed your mind, so I'm sure you've thought about this really deeply. So I was going to respond to Marjorie's earlier position, but unfortunately, her earlier position is not a current position.
Well, I
So
read.
what
I
will
read.
say is,
I read Seinfeld. The clip
yeah, we'll
from
get to that.
Seinfeld.
In a
We'll
minute.
get to that in a second.
Can I
changed my
say,
mind.
get out of here. The agreed upon deal was you're going to stay till Sunday night or whatever it was. First thing Monday morning, you unilaterally decide. First of all, I don't like people in my house to begin with.
They were going to leave on
But if you were
Sunday,
in-
Jim.
okay.
They weren't going to stay Monday morning. They were going to leave on Sunday.
Okay, fine. So whatever. So as I said, time's up. Get out of here. And if it turns out, don't even leave the luggage in the house. Leave the luggage outside the house. No, I'm serious. And if you want to come back and get it at some point, they planned this weekend. I know it sounds crass. They planned the weekend. The hosts honored their obligation, and they specifically decided to take the day off, not to spend another day with their friends or their ex-friends in this case, but to essentially recover from what could be a taxing weekend.
Okay.
So I know it seems crass, but get the hell out of my house.
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion.
Exactly. Well, wait,
Our
my
staff
opinion or their opinion? What do they say?
Is making fun of me, saying every week Marjorie's firmly on both sides. Not every week. And sometimes I'm not quite firmly there either.
No, not only is she generally on both sides, she generally is on a different side an hour after she was on the other side.
Well,
I mean, it's impossible to plan for
because
these things.
I listened to Elaine from Seinfeld.
Oh, this is a good one, actually.
And she had a similar issue
Yeah,
with
it
the
is.
guest overstaying their welcome. And she convinced me, here she is, after the guest missed their alarm to catch his flight after a grueling week-long stay.
Get up! The alarm didn't go off. It's 9:15. You're gonna miss the plane. It's 9:15.
9:15?
Yeah, 9:15.
We'll never make it. I'll leave tomorrow.
Tomorrow? Are you crazy? No, now, let's go. Put your pants on.
What's the big deal? If we don't make
Put
it,
your
I'll
pants
just
on.
go tomorrow or the next day.
Oh, you have your ticket. You have to go now.
We'll never make it.
Don't say that.
Well, it takes 45 minutes to get. It takes 45 minutes to get there. That'll only leave me 5 minutes to get to the plane.
Shut up and pack.
I am so into shut up and pack. That is a great little moment
That was great.
for Elaine there. 877-301-8970. So you know what my position is the hosts are totally right. Shut up and pack and get out of here. And we're not quite sure what Marjorie's position is.
There's a question. You know, if
What
you
is it?
invite people for the weekend, that's 2 nights, right? And 2 nights is
Friday
a
and
lot of
Saturday.
nights. Lots of times you invite somebody for your house, you want it to be one night.
Mm-hmm.
So when it's going into 2 nights, that's already stretching it, if you ask me. And now they're planning on 2 nights and an entire long day.
You know what it's like? Let me be legalistic here.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a contract. The contract you made with your friends who are the hosts is, as you say, we're staying Friday and Saturday night. We are not choosing unilaterally to extend this contract and
That's
stay
right.
through Monday and ruining your life. By the way, Callie Crossley just called the control room. The guests are the a-holes.
Yeah, she
Once
agrees
again,
with us.
she agrees with you too. That's right. She is right.
And you know, the friends are upset because the wife...
Which friends?
The a-hole
visitors,
friends are
yeah.
upset because they want her to just be able to hang
Exactly.
around the apartment for another day, or have her show them around other sights and sounds.
Can I tell you,
town.
by the way, let me tell you the difference between me and Marjorie,
outrageous.
if you didn't know this already. If Marjorie was the host and had taken the day off and they decided to stay, she'd spend the whole day showing them around, buying them lunch, carrying their luggage for them, whatever. I would mimic Elaine and say, shut up and pack.
Okay.
Thank you. 877-301.
That was such a great show.
89.
She's so great.
You want to know something?
Does.
I just saw.
She got a great podcast. Louis Dreyfus, Julia Louis Dreyfus, of interviewing older women like Jane Fonda, who's going to be in her 80s by now. Yeah, it's good.
Can I say one thing about her? As you know, I'm a list obsessed kind of person. I love lists, and I look at every list when I get a link saying the best television shows of all time, and it's always either Wired or The Sopranos. You know what number one was on the list last week?
Seinfeld?
Veep. I think,
Veep.
and totally. I don't even know who made the list, but she is brilliant. The whole cast is brilliant.
It's like a precursor of a ridiculous presidency, and now
yeah,
here we are.
Here we are. 877-301-8970. Back to who is the a-hole? Let's start in Portsmouth with Nancy. Hi, Nancy.
Hi.
Hi.
I think that both of them have issues with how they address things.
And why is that?
And, well, obviously it was extremely rude for their guests to assume that they could just drop everything to accommodate them. But also, I think it was kind of rude the way they handled it. I think they should have said, I'm sorry, we have things we are planning on doing on Monday, and try to change your arrangements again because we are not available to help you on Monday.
Yeah, she could have said, leave your luggage here. If you want to go down to the museum, so-and-so, or you want to go have lunch, we can recommend places to go, or something like that.
Well, can I tell you, Nancy, Marjorie, of course, is playing both sides of the thing, as are you here, because I'm going to add a little piece. This is from Reddit. Here's a practical issue that the host faces. She says she'll have to take them to the airport or, get this, pay for their ride share because her friend, the visitor, refuses to pay, and she'll also need to feed him. I mean, come on, the demands are ridiculous.
Guests refuse to pay for the ride share?
I am reading from the Reddit thing, yes. So what do you think of that, Nancy?
Okay. I think it's absolutely absurd. I mean, I would. How do you have a friend like that in the first place?
Exactly.
Is my question.
3 words: shut up and pack. Nancy, thank you, Nancy. It's great to talk to you. Thank you for the call. We appreciate it.
A texter says, Jim's guests can't wait to leave. So there you go.
Do you like people staying over your house? Be honest here, because I know you're thinking somebody wanted to stay over your house, you're going to offend them. Forget that for a minute. Just answer the question honestly.
Usually 1 day, 2 days tops.
Yeah. I have a similar feeling. I'd say 1 hour, 2 hours tops. That's about right. You come over, you sit down, you take off your coat, you have a drink, you stand up, you leave. That's essentially my position about that.
My father bought a summer cottage a million years ago.
I know that. Cape, yeah, I know it.
$9,000.
That's what he bought it for?
Well, it was like in the 60s.
Wow, okay.
Anyway, and I live in Fall River.
I know where you grew up.
Friends would come, just show up. They would just show up.
At the Cape?
To come down.
Wait, without calling in advance?
Yeah. My mother had no problem telling them they couldn't come.
Well, I love your mother in absentia.
But they would just show up. They just come down with their beach stuff.
Why is this any different, by the way? Why is overstaying the agreed upon time any different than showing up without prior approval? They didn't say they were staying Monday until they decided to stay on Monday.
Well, the rideshare detail just put me over the edge.
Well, obviously you should read the material before the segment.
They're not going to pay for the rideshare?
She refuses to pay for the rideshare.
Okay, Cynthia in Boston says, we haven't addressed the whole problem correctly. The husband told them they were taking Monday off before they made their flight plan. And that is a great point, Jim. You should have read the material more closely, and then you would know that. Yeah, my friend and his wife have made plans to visit the summer for weekend stay. And then, it's not, she describes how before her friends booked the flights with the intent to leave Sunday, her dingbat husband let it slip that she would not be working the Monday after their weekend stay.
Wait, you blame him for being honest and transparent?
No, but that's what they did. They slipped this in. They changed the...
Why is it their business to change their behavior because the host has decided to take the day off?
I'm just trying to stick to the facts of the story. And next thing I know, says the wife, my friend tells me they'll be flying out on their red eye on Monday since I took the day off on Monday.
Well, I'm missing the point here. You're basically saying it's the husband's fault because he disclosed that they were having a day of rest on Monday?
I'm just saying they knew this. The husband slipped this in advance, so she knew before they got there that they were going to not stay.
Well, can I tell you how I feel about that fact? I don't care about it. That's how I feel about it.
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion.
You, Ms. Green. Thank you. Let's go to Alice in Dedham next. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi, thanks. And I love that Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Oh, so do we. So do we.
Announcement every time. It makes me laugh every time you play it.
Go ahead.
Okay, we don't give a crap about your
fine.
opinion.
That's enough. Thank you. Go ahead. What do you think, Alice?
Well, I have friends coming in Labor Day weekend, and they let me know when they're coming. They're coming from England. But they have been marvelous hosts to me multiple times. And they taught me this swapping back and forth of location where you don't have to handhold to have each other for guests. But it's been fabulous. And they may stay through Labor Day itself, which they knew I might have to work. So I bought them tickets to the Red Sox for that day on the Green Monster.
Wow.
And I included myself. And so if I can get the day off, then the three of us go up on the Green Monster and see the city and have a great last day. Or maybe I'll substitute my daughter in if I have to work. But that's what you do for friends. I mean, that's how you make great places to go in this world, and how you receive your friends when they come, I think.
Can I tell you something, Alice?
Lovely,
I hope
Alice.
you don't take this the wrong way, Alice. You are far too nice for this show. So we're glad you called, but thank you. And you really, what a terrific host and person you are. Alice, thank you for the call.
Listen to this from Chris in Rentham. I had a guest come to a Christmas party and stay for a week.
Yeah, I mean, in all seriousness. You know, when Alice was just calling a second ago, the difference there is, do you understand what the difference is? Her friends from England said they might stay for Labor Day. If these a-holes, these guests, had said we might stay through Monday, it'd be a different kettle of fish. Am I not right that the only time they decided to stay Monday was when the husband spilled the beans and said we're taking off Monday? Is that not right?
That's right.
So that's totally inappropriate.
Totally
How
inappropriate.
come you were not worked into a frenzy over this? Why are you not? This is a horrible situation.
Well, I'm not as worked
totally
into a frenzy
inappropriate
as you. But listen to this one. My mom used to say dead fish and house guests need to be thrown out after 3 days. We've just had 3 70-year-old men in our house for 10 days, mostly self-invited. Ann Landers, remember she was Dear Abby's sister.
Yes.
Ann Landers said, you can't be a doormat unless you lie down. I say those guests are just plain rude.
Wow, that is horrible.
I tell you,
You
that's
ever
a good one.
overstay their agreed upon welcome in your house? Not with your father and mother, but I mean in your grown-up
I
lifetime.
I don't think so.
Yeah, and you're Marjorie forgot we're streaming, and she just did a beautiful eye roll that was worthy of a major motion picture.
Phyllis,
whoever
in
you
the
are,
car.
why don't you call us and tell us? Okay, thank you, Phyllis.
Hi, this is Phyllis.
Oh, you're Phyllis.
Hi,
I'm
Phyllis.
sorry. Hi, Phyllis in the car. Welcome.
Hi, Phyllis. Well, I have to agree with Alice, your former caller.
What'd she say?
It's very disheartening for all you people to feel like this is an imposition. When my friends come to my house, it's like a joyous occasion. And my husband and I love to entertain, and he loves to cook. And when you come, if on the last day you decide you want to stay longer, we're happy to have you. Because, I mean, today, how often do you get to spend time with people that you like and you love and you want to have fun with? I mean, I'm just very sad that most people would feel like this was an imposition. We were in Montreal once, packed, outside with the suitcases ready to be put in the car, and our friends decided to convince us to stay one more night. And we both had to be in work the next day, and we both called out sick, and we just stayed one more night because they didn't want to let us go. And that's how we feel when we have friends over. I wish more people felt like this.
You are really, if there were more people like you, the world would
person.
be a far more beautiful place, Phyllis. Thank you for, no, I'm serious. That was a beautiful call. Now, apparently, our staff is amazing. I mean, really amazing. They pivot on a dime or whatever that expression is. So we apparently have, I haven't heard it yet, you will hear it with me, exclusive sound of Marjorie with her house guests. Here it is.
Shut up and piss!
Okay, fine.
Oh, here's
God.
one. A texter's talking about their father having a second home in Nova Scotia, where neighbors most nights would just walk into the house, no knocking, sit at the kitchen table, and his dad would offer them a drink. They were called fair-to-dos or kitchen parties. Imagine having somebody come over to your house and just walk in.
No. The answer is no, I cannot imagine that.
But maybe there's something wrong with
happening.
us. Phyllis was thrilled.
You know what I do with guests who overstay their welcome generally? What? I engage in forest dropping. Do you have any idea what forest dropping is?
People in the car out to
you
the
take
forest
them in the forest
and leave them there.
with a flashlight.
Have you ever had any guests in Cambridge?
I mean, unannounced? Let me put it this way. First of all, I'm not nearly as horrible as a lot of people think I am. Is that a?
You're not. No,
I'm not quite as horrible.
Not quite.
However, one of the things that I do not, let me be as mild-mannered as I can be, don't come knocking on my door without texting or calling in advance. And by the way, if you text, call in advance, there's a decent chance I'll say hello to you or whatever you want to do. Maybe even come
out
upstairs.
to the door and wave.
But I am serious. Is there anything ruder than just showing up? I mean, if you live like in the sticks or something, I get that. But if you live like in a city, like civilization kind of thing, who does that? Would you ever drop in at somebody's house without calling or texting in advance?
No, but I think people used to. I think people would stop by.
Well, that's before they had phones, Marjorie. That's before they had phones. People would stop by. I believe Alexander Graham Bell would stop by his friend's house, and then he said, "Maybe I should invent the whatever that thing is."
Telephone.
Thank you.
Okay.
Stephen Arlington. By the way, the number's 877-301-8970. It is who is the a-hole site? What's that?
Creature from Marblehead. I had a friend come over on Thanksgiving in 1994. She's still here. Now we have 2 kids and 3 dogs.
That's a good one, Christian.
Oh, here's another one.
Oh, sorry. Hold on,
the
Steve. Don't go away.
lockdown when you were assured nobody would even stop over, never mind staying over.
That's true, by the way.
Yeah.
We didn't wish anybody
ill. You must have loved that.
Let's go to Steve in Arlington, who's been very patient. Hi, Steve. Welcome.
Hey, happy to call in and
we're glad to have you.
Show.
Yeah.
I listened to it, and what I came away feeling like was the host. I think that the guests were rude. Not to tell the host that they intended to stay an extra day before they went and changed their reservations and all that. That they should have definitely done that. So that makes them a-holes for sure. But I think the host could have been a little more flexible too.
Yeah. Well, what would you have done as a flexible host? What would you have done that was sort of a middle ground, as Marjorie described it before there, Steve? What would you have done?
I would have said, hey, that's fine. Stay another day, but I've got plans and I've got things that I want to do. You're welcome to leave your bags at the house and come back and get them later and head to the airport. You don't have to give in and be a doormat, so to speak, but you can also, I think, in a more kind and empathetic way, not kind of get in the face of your guest.
Another person who is far nicer than at least one of us. Steve, thank you for your very thoughtful call. We
here's
appreciate
a text that's quoting Judith Manners. You know, she did that book, the etiquette book, Miss Manners.
Oh, Miss Manners.
Yeah, Miss Manners. She used to say, your job as a guest is to entertain yourself by day and your host by night.
Oh, I like that.
I like that.
I like that a lot.
So you go out sightseeing by day and then take your host out to dinner at night.
Wow. That's beautiful.
Phyllis wouldn't like that, though. She would have cooked a 3-course meal.
She might have. Now, Jorge in Malden has a really interesting point of view, and I guess he's attempting to point out maybe a little bit of a conflict in our positions. Here's what Jorge writes. Yesterday, you were, it takes a village.
That's right.
Today, it's not in my house. To make the village work, this is what Jorge says, you need to make yourself a bit uncomfortable. Now, how do you respond to Jorge?
I mean,
okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion.
We actually do.
I would
care
say
about
he's
Jorge's
absolutely
position.
right. We are being hypocritical because we were talking about it takes a village to raise the kids, but now we're saying we don't want to have anything to do with the village unless they call or text or make an appointment 2 weeks in advance.
Can I explain what Jorge, I mean this kindly, Jorge, what you obviously don't understand. That was yesterday. Today is today. So don't worry about it, okay? And try not to point out inconsistencies. It's impolite. Let's go to Ellie in Cranston. We are doing our Marjorie's favorite segment anyway. Who is the a-hole? Hello there.
Well, listen, I'm not a doormat.
Yeah.
I love to have people come stay at my big old house. I'm living alone, and they got lots of bedrooms. So when they come, they just act as if it's their own house. They help me cook, clean up. I know. It sounds like I'm being taken advantage of, but I'm not, and I love it. And it just feels like a vacation for me because I've got people around, and it's fun. So I totally disagree with you guys.
Well, again, another incredibly kind, generous. I mean, you're even nicer than Marjorie, which takes some nicety on your part. Ellie, thank you for your honest phone call, too. We appreciate that.
Now, here's a person that says, I'm fortunate that there is a lovely inn literally next door to me. I'm sure you'll love it there. This Peter from Mystic says to his guests if they want to stay an extra day.
But do you have to pay for them if they want to stay an extra day? Or do you just say you can stay down the road at the so-and-so inn?
He is not volunteering to take out his visa. He just informs the guests that there's a lovely inn next door, and I'm sure you'll love it there.
In fact, he's going to revoke his visa. Now, what do you think of the fact...
We should explain the story again.
Oh, we should explain the story again. Well, why don't you... I'd like to hear you try to explain it. Go ahead.
Okay.
This should be good.
Here's the story.
Okay. It's not going to work
a friend
well.
and his wife, this couple, have made plans to visit us this summer,
I don't know why
says the Reddit writer, for a weekend stay. So it's not that far. They were going to just come for the weekend, but then her husband let it slip that the hostess wife was taking Monday off. Yeah. So the friends decided to change their return flight to the Red Eye on Monday night, meaning they would be there
Stay
an
a whole
extra
additional day.
They would not be leaving on Sunday. They would be leaving on Monday.
Which was not part of the deal. Yeah.
And the wife sort of flipped out because she said she needed a day to kind of relax and tidy up after the couple's departure. And she was upset that they expected her to entertain them for day 3.
Now, can I ask you one question, if I may?
Yes.
I assume you're re-explaining it because you think our show is over at 3 o'clock. Is that the reason you chose to explain it again?
I don't know why I chose to, because it is over in like 5 minutes.
Well, it's 2 of us. We don't understand why you did it either. But
Ileana in Holston.
But can I just say it was an excellent re-explanation.
Thank you.
It was.
Ileana in Holston. What do you think, Ileana?
Hi, Ileana. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Thank you.
I love the show. But
Thanks.
I just want to say that, we have guests all the time. People change plans. It will be good to know that plans have changed, but often we forget. I grew up in Costa Rica, and when I was growing up, very few people had phones. So I remember my mother always saying, we have to make more food in case somebody shows up. And that's the way we lived. We never knew when somebody was coming, and you were always happy to see them.
So, Ileana, just to be clear here, like you'd be sitting at home with your family, and all of a sudden someone you didn't expect shows up, and you bring out a plate of food, and you embrace the whole moment. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Oh my God! I mean, it's
okay.
It's beautiful. I've been to Costa Rica. Beautiful country, beautiful people. Cambridge is a whole different story as far as I'm concerned. But Ileana, that was fabulous.
I think we've been exposed as
great
misanthropes,
upbringing.
Jim.
Misanthropes.
Yes.
No, not you. You're fine with this staying over.
As long as she entertained herself on Monday.
No, but you changed that because you read that one text. You're so impressionable. That wasn't your position 10 minutes ago. And then you read one text, and you totally. By the way, you not only totally changed your position, you don't even know you changed your position.
I want to be like Phyllis.
Phyllis.
Yeah, you have this pleading look on your face. Tell me what to think. Tell me what to say.
I would bet, one of our most fun parts of our show, for us at least,
Jared.
Not asking Jared, guessing what Jared's. I would say the notion that if you go to Jared's house and knock on the door without having called or texted in advance is probably not a great idea. Is that a safe assumption?
No.
I don't buy it.
No, here's the thing. I think you guys are both off on this one because if they're a friend who's going to stay at your house, presumably you know them well enough that you're happy that they're coming to your house. And if they want to eke out an extra day, then you either have the conversation with them that you send them to the inn next door, or you just eat it and have them stay over. It's only a day. I mean, come on.
By the way, you missed it. It's not happy they're coming to your house. Happy that they're coming to your house for 2 days, not for 3 days. That was the agreed upon deal.
Yeah, but what's an extra day?
Has anyone ever knocked on your door? This is total BS what you're saying. Did anybody ever knock on your door without you knowing you were happy to see them?
I never answered the door without
Exactly.
Okay, we cut to the
One
truth.
of the texters says, time to claim norovirus.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what you do. That's
Okay,
what you do.
Slam up
you
the
have the
biohazard
father
tape on your door.
of one of my favorite performers on the planet, who I saw at the City Winery. We actually called into our show.
It could be one of
Rufus
two people.
Wainwright's father is
yes.
Loudon Wainwright. He's
Yeah.
on your show today.
Yes, I wasn't sure if you were talking about Rufus or Martha, because there's also Martha Wainwright.
Oh, of course there is.
Yeah,
the
Loudon,
sister,
yeah,
right.
exactly. So Loudon Wainwright is on, that's not easy to say, is on the show today
great.
talking about, he's coming here doing 2 concerts, Lowell and Northampton, and as you probably have gleaned if you've listened to his album or listened to Rufus or Martha talk about him, he's very candid about family relationships, marriages, divorce, lust, all of the things.
Did you ever see him? I saw him when I was younger a couple of times.
I've never had the
he
chance.
He was fabulous. Loudon was. I mean, Rufus is incredible. Loudon is great. Yeah.
And he's still going strong. Remember back in the 60s, people were saying he was going to take on the Bob Dylan mantle and carry that forward.
That's right.
He's great.
Yeah.
What else do you have?
And then, well, this is a good segment to segue out of what you guys have been talking about. Dana Casperson, she's a dancer who has moved into the realm of conflict and reconciliation, and she has a new book out called Conflict is an Opportunity. She takes a lot of the notions of being a dancer and movement and applies those to the mind and dealing with conflict. And then we'll have a visit from Smith College Museum of Art.
Oh, great.
Oh, that's a wonderful museum of art. They have all those Rodins up there.
They do, and it's even more wonderful because now it's free all the time.
Fantastic.
Oh, we love free. Jared, we'll be listening.
Thank you very much, Jared.
Why don't you go? Why doesn't everybody go over and knock on Jared's door?
Okay.
See how that goes.
Jared is not home right now.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio. You can keep up with us 24/7 by way of our podcast, or check out our TikTok page at Boston Public Radio. Tomorrow, we're live at the Boston Public Library. Paul Willis is our guest for Live Music Friday. He's about to release a new album, book, and teaching curriculum called Hip Hop Leadership. That's going to be great. Also joining us, former Massachusetts Secretary of Public Safety Andrew Cabral, Boston Globe business columnist Shirley Young, and media maven Sue O'Connell on the Karen Reed trial, and GBH's Adam Riley for our press play. They're going to be together actually for press play, Sue and Adam.
And the central story there, as Marjorie said before, is about what's happening in 60 Minutes and CBS News because of the abject greed of the woman who owns the operation.
Our crew is Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss, our engineer John the Claw Parker, our executive producer Jay Bologna. Special thanks to Patrick Lally for running today's YouTube stream. Stay tuned to The Culture Show with Jared Bowen, which starts immediately after us on 89.7 GBH. I am Marjorie Egan.
Jim Browdy.
Thanks again for tuning in, and hope you have a wonderful afternoon and this beautiful day.
Shut up and pick!
What's trending? What's interesting? What's going on around town? We're talking all things.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Bridgewater State University, helping create jobs for Massachusetts and working to connect industry leaders to graduates, elevating business in Boston and beyond. bridgew.edu/elevate. Father Brown must track down a killer on the loose, but as new victims